Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into the mind of one of history's greatest self-improvers. We're going to borrow the brain of a young, ambitious printer in 18th century Philadelphia who came up with a plan so audacious, so geeky, and so profoundly optimistic that it still feels a little bit crazy today. Forget about just trying to be a good person in a vague, abstract way. You're about to engineer it. You're going to create a system, a checklist, for achieving moral perfection. Frankly, with our modern attention spans, you'd probably struggle to get past the first virtue on the first day, but that's what makes this so fascinating. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel find other curious minds like yours. And while you're at it, drop a comment letting me know what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how this little community spans across the globe and the time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The idea doesn't strike you like a bolt of lightning. It's quieter than that. It arrives like the slow, creeping dawn on a cool Philadelphia morning. You're a young man, not yet 30, but you feel older. You've already crossed an ocean, learned a demanding trade, started your own business, and made more than a few mistakes you'd rather forget. You are sitting in a small, rented room. The air smells of ink, old paper, and the faint, lingering scent of last night's beeswax candle. Outside, the wooden carts are beginning to rattle over the cobblestones, but in here it is still, and in this stillness a thought solidifies. It's a thought you've been circling for months, maybe years. What if being a good person was a matter of chance, or mood, or divine grace? What if it was a skill? What if virtue could be practiced, like learning French or mastering the intricate mechanics of a printing press? The thought is intoxicating. It's the very essence of your era, this age of reason. You and your contemporaries are obsessed with the idea that the universe is a rational, orderly place, a grand clockwork machine set in motion by a master watchmaker. If nature follows laws, if planets move in predictable orbits, then why shouldn't human character? Why should your own soul be left to chaos? You get up and pace the creaking floorboards. The goal crystallizes in your mind, bold and beautifully simple. You will arrive at moral perfection. You will live your life, from this day forward, without committing any fault at any time. You actually pause for a moment, struck by the sheer arrogance of it. Who do you think you are? Saints and prophets have struggled with this for millennia. But your confidence is not born of piety, it's born of logic. You believe you know what is right and what is wrong. You rarely find yourself in a situation where you're unsure of the correct course of action. The problem isn't knowing, the problem is doing. Your passions, your habits, your inattention, they get in the way. So this won't be a project of prayer and hope. It will be a project of engineering. You need a system. You've read the popular essays of the day, of course. The Spectator, with its witty observations on manners and society, is a favorite. You even used its articles to teach yourself how to write with elegance and clarity. But those are mere suggestions, pleasant conversations on paper. They lack rigor. They don't provide a method. This is where historians will later pinpoint your unique genius. You're not just consuming the culture of self-improvement, you're turning it into a science. You are creating a personal operating system for the soul. The plan begins to form. You can't attack all your faults at once. That would be like trying to fight an entire army single-handedly. No, you must be methodical. You will make a list of all the virtues you wish to acquire. You'll name them, define them precisely, leaving no room for ambiguity. Temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, and much later, at the suggestion of a friend, you add humility. Each week, you will focus all your energy on mastering a single virtue. In 13 weeks, you will have completed one full course, and in a single year, you can complete 4 courses. You imagine your character being polished over time like a gemstone, each pass of the polishing cloth removing another imperfection until it shines with flawless brilliance. It's a beautiful vision, and it's a practical one too. You are a businessman in a city that is really just a large town. Everyone knows everyone else's business. Reputation is everything. A man who is known to be industrious, frugal, and sincere is a man who gets contracts. HES, a man people will trust with their money and their printing jobs. And here in the quiet of your room, you're touching upon a question that academics will debate for centuries to come. Is this grand project a sincere, private quest for enlightenment, or is it the ultimate act of personal branding? Are you trying to be good, or just to appear good for the sake of your career? The question hangs in the air, but to you, it feels like a false choice. In the pragmatic world of colonial America, becoming a better person and building a better life are not separate endeavors. They are two threads woven into the same strong rope. The candle sputters, its flame dancing low. The first light of day is now seeping through the window pane. Your mind is buzzing with energy. The sheer audacity of the plan has faded. It feels possible. It feels right. But an abstract plan is not enough. You're a practical man. You work with your hands. To make this real, you will need a tool. Something tangible. Something you can hold and mark and measure your progress with. You need a book. A special little book. You step out of your printing shop and into the full-throated roar of High Street. The grand, orderly plan you conceived in the quiet of your room now meets the glorious, messy reality of Philadelphia. And what a reality it is. This isn't some sleepy colonial backwater. This is the largest, most vibrant, and fastest-growing city in British North America. The air itself feels thick with ambition, a soupy mixture of salt, tang, and humidity from the Delaware River, the sharp scent of sawdust from a nearby carpenter's shop, and the ever-present, undeniably pungent aroma of horse manure. Your boots, freshly polished this morning, find their way over the uneven cobblestones. It's a city built on a sensible grid, a testament to founder William Penn's orderly mind, but the life teeming within that grid is anything but. A heavy draycart, laden with barrels of molasses fresh off a ship from the West Indies, rumbles past its iron-rimmed wheels, threatening to splash you with the contents of a murky puddle. The driver shouts something you don't quite catch, a string of curses that are as much a part of the city's soundscape as the chiming of the Christ Church bells. You are a printer, a man of letters and logic, but here, you are one of 1,000 ants in a bustling colony. To your left, a group of sailors, their faces weathered from the Atlantic sun, are haggling loudly with a merchant outside his storefront. You hear snippets of Welsh and German mixed in with their English. A daily reminder that this city is a magnet for the hopeful and the desperate from across Europe. Everyone, it seems, has come here to make something of themselves. This city is the perfect laboratory for your experiment in moral perfection. Every single one of your chosen virtues is tested before you've even walked a block. Your desire for tranquility is challenged by the constant noise. Your commitment to cleanliness is tested when you have to deftly sidestep large sow-and-her piglets, which are currently serving as the city's unofficial sanitation department, rooting happily through a pile of discarded vegetable scraps. This is a quirky and slightly smelly fact of 18th century urban life that many sanitized historical accounts tend to leave out. These roaming pigs are so common that laws are occasionally passed to control them, but they're also so useful for eating garbage that the laws are rarely enforced. For you, they are a constant, grunting reminder of the gap between your ideal of an orderly world and the world as it actually is. You walk past the London Coffee House, the hub of the city's commercial and political life. Inside, men in powdered wigs and fine woolen coats are poring over shipping news, debating the latest pronouncements from Parliament, and cutting deals that will send ships laden with Pennsylvania flour and timber across the ocean. This is where your virtue of silence will face its sternest test. In a world where talk is business and reputation is built on clever conversation, learning to speak only when it benefits others or yourself is a radical act. You see faces from every corner of the Christian world. There are the soberly dressed Quakers, the city's founding and still powerful elite, whose belief in an inner light has shaped the city's culture of tolerance. But you also see Anglicans, Presbyterians, German Lutherans, and Mennonites. This diversity is the city's strength, the very engine of its growth. And it leads you to ponder a question that historians still argue about today. Was this famous Pennsylvania tolerance a high-minded philosophical principle, a genuine commitment to religious freedom for its own sake? Or was it, at its heart, a brilliantly pragmatic business strategy? William Penn needed to populate his colony, and promising people they could worship as they pleased without being persecuted was the best marketing pitch of the 17th century. To you, living in the result of that policy, it feels like both. It is a noble ideal that also happens to be fantastic for the economy. This environment, this chaotic, striving polyglot city, is the raw material you have to work with. It's what makes your project so necessary. In a quieter, more homogeneous town, perhaps virtue would be easier, but it would also be less meaningful. Here, to be frugal when surrounded by new wealth, to be sincere when surrounded by sharp dealers, to be industrious when 1,000 distractions call your name, that is a true achievement. Your plan for moral perfection isn't an escape from this world, it's a tool for navigating it successfully. It is a compass for your soul in a city that could easily cause you to lose your way. Your destination is a small stationer's shop, tucked away on a side street. You need a blank book, something small enough to fit in your pocket, but with enough pages to last. You could, of course, bind one yourself in your own shop, but buying one feels like a small, formal commitment. A purchase that marks the official beginning of the project. As you push open the door, a small bell jingles, and the scent of paper, leather, and binding glue washes over you. This is it. The next step is no longer just a thought. You're here about to create the physical artifact at the heart of your grand, private quest. The stationer's shop is a sanctuary of quiet. The chaos of the street fades, replaced by the hushed, library-like atmosphere of paper goods waiting for a purpose. You run your hand over a stack of notebooks, feeling the texture of their humble cardboard covers. The shopkeeper, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, watches you with a practiced, neutral expression. He sells ledgers to merchants, notebooks to scholars, and fine vellum to lawyers. He has no idea that you are about to purchase the field journal for a one-man expedition into the uncharted territory of your own character. You select a small book about the size of your palm. It's unassuming, with a plain, sturdy cover. Perfect. It means to be practical, not ostentatious. This is a tool, not a diary for your deepest feelings. You pay the man a few shillings, the coins clinking on the wooden counter, and tuck the book into the deep inner pocket of your waistcoat. It feels solid against your ribs, a tangible promise you're making to yourself. Back in your print shop, after the day's work is done and your apprentice has gone home, you finally sit down to prepare your new tool. The last rays of sunlight stream through the grimy window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. You light a candle, the flame small but steady, and open the book to its first blank page. This is where your inner systems designer truly comes alive. A list of virtues is not enough. You need a way to track your progress, to visualize your data. Your mind, so accustomed to the logic of typesetting, arranging individual letters into orderly rows and columns to form a coherent whole, applies the same principle to your soul. You will create a chart. You take a ruler and a pen with a fine nib. With painstaking precision, you draw a series of read lines. You create a table with 7 columns, 1 for each day of the week. Then you add 13 rows, 1 for each of your virtues. You write the name of each virtue down the left-hand side, starting with Temperance. You use a shortened, almost coded version of the name. It's a private language for a private project. The first virtue is temperance, and you write its full definition at the top of the page, a guiding precept: eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Simple, direct, unsentimental. You will focus on temperance for the entire first week, while still trying your best on the others. The following week, you will move your primary focus to silence, and so on. Now comes the crucial part of the system, the accounting of your failures. You decide that each evening before you sleep, you will conduct a review of the day. You will ask yourself, what good have I done this day, and examine your conduct against the virtues. For every transgression you can recall, you will mark a little black spot with your pen in the corresponding row and column. A spot for that extra glass of Madeira you had at lunch. A spot for the idle gossip you engaged in at the coffee house. A spot for losing your temper with the apprentice. The goal is wonderfully, terrifyingly simple, to one day have a week with no black spots. A clean page. As you sit there, carefully drawing this grid, you're pioneering a technique that will be rediscovered 2.5 centuries later by productivity gurus and app developers. Your little book is the analog 18th century version of a habit tracking app. The daily check-in, the visual representation of streaks, the focus on one habit at a time, it's all there. Your GIM if it's self-improvement. But there's a deeper, more subtle aspect to this that many modern interpretations miss. Some historians will later argue that the very act of creating this book was a form of self-hypnosis, that by meticulously defining, scheduling, and tracking your virtues, you were embedding them deep within your subconscious. The ritual itself, the nightly review, the physical act of marking a spot, was a powerful tool for behavioral modification. You also decide to insert a page into your book for a daily schedule. This is another stroke of genius. You realize that moral failings don't just happen. They happen in the unstructured, unguarded moments of the day. Idleness is the devil's workshop, as the proverb goes. So you will structure your entire day from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. You block out time for work, for reading, for meals. You even schedule a 2-hour block in the middle of the day for read, or overlook my accounts and dine. It's a schedule designed for maximum efficiency and minimum opportunity for vice. This rigid schedule, however, raises a question that scholars of your life still debate. Did you actually follow it? Day in on day out. Some see it as a literal minute-by-minute account of your day. Others see it as an ideal, aspirational blueprint for the perfect day that you aimed for, but, like any human, frequently missed. Was it a record of your life, or a target for it? The truth most likely lies somewhere in between. It was the structure you constantly strove to return to. You finish the chart for the first week. The page looks clean, orderly, and full of promise. The little empty boxes wait to be filled or hopefully to remain empty. The book is no longer just a book. It is a mirror, a quiet, unforgiving judge that will live in your pocket. It will not lecture you or offer absolution. It will simply reflect the data. You blow on the ink to dry it, the red and black lines dark against the cream-colored paper. The project now feels real. Tomorrow morning, when you wake to the question you've assigned for yourself, what good shall I do this day, the experiment begins. The first week is dedicated to temperance. It seems like a sensible, manageable place to start. Little do you know how profoundly this one small virtue will challenge the very fabric of your social and professional life. The first morning of your great project begins not with a philosophical revelation, but with the simple, stark reality of your breakfast. You sit at your small table with a bowl of porridge, a piece of bread, and a mug of water. The virtue of the week is temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. It sounds straightforward enough, noble, even. But as you eat your meager meal, you realize this virtue is not just about avoiding gluttony. It's about control. It's the foundation stone of your entire system. If you can't control the most basic physical urges, how can you possibly hope to master the more complex, subtle failings of character? You head to your printing shop, the taste of plain porridge still in your mouth. Your apprentice, a young boy still prone to daydreaming, is already there, sweeping the floor. The day's work begins. You are setting type for a pamphlet, a tedious but necessary job. Your fingers, stained with ink, move with practiced speed, plucking the tiny metal letters from the type case and arranging them into lines on your composing stick. It's demanding work that requires focus, and you find that your simple breakfast has left your mind feeling unusually clear. There is no sluggishness, no heaviness. It's an early, positive data point. The first real test comes at midday. Usually you would head to a tavern for your main meal. The taverns of Philadelphia are the engines of social life. It's where you eat, drink, catch up on news, make business connections, and feel like part of the city. But today you hesitate. A tavern meal means a hearty slab of roasted meat, bread swimming in gravy, and most importantly, several glasses of beer or Madeira. It's social, it's enjoyable, and it is a direct violation of eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Instead, you do something unusual. You go to a baker's, buy a simple biscuit and a handful of raisins, and take your lunch back to the shop. You eat it while reviewing your account books, just as your new schedule dictates. Your apprentice watches you, a curious look on his face. HES used to you being out for a good hour or more. This is new. This decision introduces you to an unexpected side effect of temperance. It saves you money and time. The hearty tavern meal would have cost several pence. Your biscuit and raisin lunch costs a fraction of that. The hour or more spent in the tavern is now an hour of productive work. You make a mental note, virtue. It seems, can be profitable. This practical, almost bottom-line approach to morality is something that will fascinate and sometimes frustrate future biographers. Historians will debate whether your focus on the material benefits of virtue cheapens the concept. Was your frugality a moral stance, or just good business sense? Were you tempered for the sake of your soul or for the sake of your wallet? For you, the distinction is meaningless. You live in a world where piety and profit are not seen as enemies. In fact, many of your contemporaries, particularly those with a Puritan or Quaker background, believed that worldly success was a sign of God's favor. Being good and doing well were two sides of the same coin. The afternoon brings another, more subtle challenge. A potential client comes into the shop to discuss a large printing job. HES, a wealthy merchant, the kind of customer you need to build your business. The customary way to seal such a negotiation would be to share a drink. A glass of wine or rum to toast the new partnership. It's a social lubricant, a ritual of trust and goodwill. The merchant suggests it, and for a moment you are caught. To refuse could be seen as rude, even insulting. It could jeopardize the deal. Here, temperance clashes directly with another unwritten rule of 18th century business, sociability. This is where you have to be clever. You don't refuse outright. You deftly redirect. You suggest that to celebrate, you should instead immediately begin laying out a sample page for his approval. You channel the energy of the moment not into drinking but into industry. The merchant, a practical man himself, is impressed by your eagerness to get to work. The deal is secure. You have dodged the elevation of drink and reinforced your reputation as a diligent, serious craftsman. That evening, as you prepare for your nightly review, you think about the day. It was a day of small victories, but then you remember a small, almost forgotten detail. At one point, while frustrated with a piece of jammed equipment, you let out a string of curses under your breath. This wasn't a failure of temperance, but it was a failure nonetheless. It was a moment of tranquility lost. As you open your little book, you take your pen, and with a sigh you place a single, tiny black spot in the row for tranquility under the column for that day. The page is not clean, but as you look at the row for temperance, it remains pristine, white, empty, and perfect. 1 week, 1 virtue. You haven't conquered your nature yet, not by a long shot, but you have data. You have a small, tangible success. The system is working. You blow out your candle with a sense of weary satisfaction. Tomorrow, you will try again, and you will discover a strange and little-known benefit of your new diet. It makes you a better swimmer. Decades later, you'll write about how your ability to swim for hours in the Thames once astonished onlookers, an endurance you credited to a life of temperate eating on drinking only water. It's a quirky footnote, a small, unexpected perk on the long, hard road to moral perfection. With a week of temperance under your belt, you feel a certain lightness, a clarity of mind you haven't known before. Your body is no longer burdened by heavy meals, your thoughts no longer clouded by midday wine. You turn the page in your little book. The next virtue on the list awaits silence. The precept you've written for yourself is, speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. On the surface, this seems easier than temperance. How hard can it be to just not talk so much? You quickly discover it is profoundly, excruciatingly difficult. Your day begins as usual, but the moment you step into the world, the challenge begins. Philadelphia is a city that runs on talk. It's the grease in the gears of commerce and society. When you buy your bread, the baker wants to chat about the weather. When you pass a neighbor, a polite exchange about his family as health is expected. To remain silent is to appear cold, arrogant, or simple-minded. The true crucible, as you knew it would be, is the London coffee house. You go there not for coffee, you're mostly drinking water these days anyway, but for information. A coffee house is the city's internet. It's where newspapers from London are read aloud, where the latest shipping arrivals are posted, where merchants gossip about commodity prices, and where aspiring politicians debate the latest controversies. To be an informed citizen, a successful businessman, you have to be there. You find a seat in a corner, determined to be a sponge, not a faucet. You listen. And for the first time, you truly listen. Before, you were always half listening, waiting for your turn to speak, formulating your own witty reply, your own insightful commentary. Now, freed from the obligation to perform, you hear things differently. You hear the subtle boasting in one merchant's account of a successful voyage. You notice the nervous tremor in another's voice as he discusses his debts. You observe how a third man, a respected community leader, uses carefully chosen questions to guide a conversation without ever stating his own opinion directly. You are a student of human nature, and this week of forced silence is the most insightful lecture you've ever attended. You also become painfully aware of what you've defined as trifling conversation. The room is buzzing with it. Idle gossip about who was seen with whom. Endless, circular debates about petty local politics that go nowhere. Vain arguments where men are more interested in winning a point than in discovering the truth. You realize you have been a champion of this. Your reputation, in part, is built on your quick wit and your love for a good argument. You have a talent for paradox and a habit of playfully contradicting people. It made you feel clever. Now, you see it as a kind of noise. A friend, a fellow member of your intellectual club, the Jun 2, cuts you on the shoulder and pulls up a chair. He launches into a story, a juicy piece of gossip about a rival printer. In the past, you would have jumped right in, adding your own speculation, enjoying the shared feeling of being in the know. Today you just nod. You listen. You offer an uncommittal. Is that so? Your friend looks at you, confused. Are you unwell, Ben? He asks. You're awfully quiet today. You have to think first. To explain your grand project of moral perfection would sound impossibly arrogant. It would violate the very spirit of the endeavor, and certainly the future virtue of humility. So you deflect. Just have a great deal on my mind with the new almanac, you say. It's not a lie. But it's not the whole truth either. It's a lesson in the delicate art of being silent without being rude. This experience leads to a fascinating and little-known personal discovery. You find that by being quiet, you actually learn more. People, you realize, love to talk. If you let them, they will fill the silence with their own ideas, their own knowledge, their own secrets. By restraining your own tongue, you become a magnet for information. This is a powerful social and business tool. You learn more about your competitors, your clients, and the state of the market in this 1 week of silence than you did in months of active chattering. But the nightly accounting in your little book is still a brutal affair. The page for silence fills up with black spots faster than the one for Temperance ever did. A thoughtless comment to your apprentice. A joke you couldn't resist telling. An argument you got drawn into despite your best intentions. It's maddening. Silence, you conclude, is not a passive virtue. It is an active, moment-to-moment struggle against habit, ego, and the simple human desire to connect. This struggle prefigures a debate that will simmer among historians for centuries. Was your public persona, the witty, avuncular, wise Pooh Richard of your famous almanac, a contradiction of this private quest for silence, or was it the ultimate expression of it? Some argue that you learned to master public language so well precisely because you studied it so intensely. You learned what was trifling and what was beneficial. The carefully crafted, aphoristic wisdom of Pooh Richard was the opposite of idle chatter. It was speech refined and distilled to its most useful form. Your public voice, they argue, was not a violation of your rule but the result of it. You learned to speak less, so that when you did speak, your words carried more weight. As the week draws to a close, you are not a master of silence. Far from it, the page is speckled with failure. But you have changed your relationship with words. You see them as tools to be used with care and precision, not as toys for idle amusement. You have learned that true power often lies not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. The next virtue on your list is order. And you have a sinking feeling that if controlling your tongue was this hard, controlling the physical world around you is going to be a nightmare. Your newfound mental clarity from Temperance and your sharpened observational skills from Silence now collide with a formidable adversary, the virtue that will plague you for the rest of your life. Order. Your precept is ambitious, almost comically so for a busy printer. Let all your things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. You look at the first part of that rule. Then you look around your print shop, and you have to suppress a laugh that would have violated last week's virtue. The shop is a temple of glorious, productive chaos. Stacks of paper, some fresh and clean, some printed on one side, some proofs with corrections scrawled in the margins, occupy every flat surface. Your typecases, which should be models of order, have a few stray letters in the wrong compartments from working in haste. There are ink smudges on the floor, on the wall, and on your apron. Tools lie on the press where you last used them. This is the natural state of a workshop in full production. To impose perfect order on it seems not just difficult, but counterproductive. To spend all your time tidying would be to sacrifice the virtue of industry. This is the first time you realize your virtues might not be entirely compatible. They can in fact work against each other. Nevertheless, you are committed to the system. For 1 week, you will be a general in a war against clutter. You start with your schedule, the second part of the rule: let each part of your business have its time. You resolve to adhere strictly to the daily timetable you created. Fever, rise, wash, and address powerful goodness. The morning block of work. The midday break for reading and accounts. The afternoon work block. The evening of music or diversion or conversation. It seems logical on paper. The first day is a disaster. A cart delivering a shipment of paper arrives 2 hours late, completely disrupting your afternoon plan. A client with an urgent job drops by unannounced, eating into your time for reading and accounts. You find yourself setting type late into the evening, long past the designated work block, stealing time from diversion or conversation. You go to bed exhausted, your schedule in tatters. The next day you try again. This time you focus on the first part of the rule. Let all your things have their places. You spend a full hour in the morning, an hour you should have been working, organizing your typecases. You sweep the floor. You stack the paper into neat, labeled piles. The shop looks magnificent. It is clean, orderly, and ready for business. Then the business starts. And within a few hours, the entropy begins its inevitable creep. You're rushing to finish a job, and you don't have time to put the composing stick back in its designated drawer. You pull out a stack of paper and the whole pile shifts, a few sheets sliding to the floor. By the end of the day, the shop doesn't look quite as chaotic as before, but the perfect order of the morning is a distant memory. Your struggle with order is one of the most human and relatable parts of your entire project. Decades later, when you write your autobiography, you will confess that this was the virtue that gave you the most trouble. You will admit that you never truly conquered it. This admission has been a great comfort to millions of readers ever since, and it has created a puzzle for historians. The you that emerges from your writings is a master of systems, a brilliant organizer of civic projects, libraries, fire companies, universities, post offices. How could a man who so successfully ordered society be so unsuccessful at ordering his own desk? This is the Franklin paradox that scholars love to debate. Some argue that you were simply exaggerating your own antidness for literary effect, a classic humble brag to make yourself seem more relatable. Others suggest there's a difference between personal tidiness and systemic organization. You might not have been good at keeping your own papers in order, but you were a genius at designing systems for other people to follow. You could design a perfectly logical subscription library. You just couldn't keep your own bookshelf tidy. A more intriguing and less discussed theory is that your mind simply wasn't wired for that kind of small-scale routine order. You were a big-picture thinker, a strategist. Your mind was a whirlwind of ideas, inventions, and schemes. The constant mundane effort of putting things back in their proper place was a poor use of your formidable mental energy. In a way, Your slight personal disorder was the cost of your immense intellectual and civic productivity. You discover this for yourself during the week. You find the mental effort required to maintain a state of perfect physical order is taxing. It distracts you from the more important, creative work of writing, editing, and planning. You are forced to make a compromise. You decide to aim for a good enough level of order. The shop doesn't have to be perfect, but it can't be so chaotic that it slows down your work. You begin to see that virtue isn't always about perfection. Sometimes it's about finding a workable, pragmatic balance. The nightly check-in is a bloodbath. The row for order in your little book becomes a solid black line of failure. You mark a spot every single day. There is no pretense of success here. It is a humbling, frustrating experience. You have a memory for where you left things, you tell yourself. A system of piles is its own kind of order, isn't it? You try to reason your way out of the failure, but the little book is unforgiving. A rule was set. The rule was broken. The black spot is marked. As the week ends, you feel a sense of relief. You are eager to move on to the next virtue resolution. Perhaps that's what you were missing. Perhaps if you were simply more resolute, you could have conquered order. You look at the scarred, blackened row in your book, and for the first time, you feel a flicker of doubt about the entire project. If something so simple, so mechanical, is this difficult, what hope do you have for the grander, more complex virtues of the heart and mind? The sting of your failure with order is still fresh as you turn your attention to the next virtue resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought. Perform without fail what you resolve. This feels like the engine that should power the whole system. It's the master virtue, the one that governs all the others. If you can master this, you can master anything. It is pure willpower, distilled into a command. You begin the week with renewed determination. Your primary resolution is simple: to succeed where you failed last week. You will follow your daily schedule. You will put your tools back in their place. You will be a man of iron resolve. The morning goes well. You wake at 5 sharp. The cold air shock to your system. You wash, you plan your day, and you get to work. You feel a surge of self-satisfaction. This is how it's supposed to be. You are the master of your own time, the captain of your own soul. Then a friend stops by the shop. He is a fellow member of the Jun too, your intellectual club, and he is excited about a new book of natural philosophy that has just arrived from England. He wants to discuss it, to debate its merits over a pint at the tavern. Your internal conflict is immediate and intense. Your schedule says work. The virtue of industry says work. But your intellectual curiosity, your thirst for new knowledge, screams to go with your friend. This isn't trifling conversation, this is the very stuff your mind feeds on. Furthermore, your friend is a valuable connection, and nurturing that relationship is important. What do you resolve to do? You remember the precept: perform without fail what you resolve. At the beginning of the day, you resolve to stick to your schedule. The path is clear, if unpleasant. You politely decline your friend's invitation, explaining you have a pressing deadline. You promise to read the book and discuss it with him at the next Junta meeting. Your friend leaves, slightly disappointed. You turn back to your composing stick, the tiny metal letters feeling cold and heavy in your hand. You have succeeded in your resolution, but it feels like a hollow victory. You've sacrificed a moment of genuine intellectual excitement and friendship for the sake of ticking a box in your system. This is a new and unsettling feeling. This moment highlights a core tension in your project. It's a system designed by your rational mind to control your messier, more passionate self. But what if your passions are not always a liability? What if your curiosity, your sociability, your spontaneous enthusiasms are actually part of your genius? This is a question that your biographers will grapple with. Some will see your system as a tool that harnessed your immense energies. Others will see it as a cage you built for yourself, a cage you work constantly, and fortunately, breaking out of. The centerpiece of your week, however, is the nightly ritual, the daily examination. Here resolution takes on a new meaning. It's not just about resolving to do things during the day. It's about having the resolve to face your own failures at night. Each evening you sit down with the little book. The candlelight flickers, casting long shadows on the wall. The city outside grows quiet. This is the moment of truth. You force yourself to replay the day in your mind, searching for faults. It's an uncomfortable process. It's much easier to just forgive yourself and go to sleep. But you resolve to be an honest accountant. You pull out the book. The grid you so carefully drew stares back at you. And with a sigh of grim determination, you dip your pen in ink. You mark a spot for the moment of irritation you felt toward your apprentice. That's a failure of tranquility. You mark a spot for boasting a little too much to a customer about the quality of your work. A failure of humility, even though you haven't formally started on that virtue yet. And you mark a spot for the 10 minutes you spent daydreaming about a new invention instead of focusing on your accounts. A failure of industry. Each black dot is a small act of courage. It's an admission of imperfection. It is you, the aspiring perfect man, acknowledging the flawed, real man you actually are. This process, more than anything, is the heart of the project. There is a little-known, almost psychological trick you're replaying on yourself here. Modern behavioral science would call it negative feedback. By forcing yourself to perform this slightly painful ritual every time you commit a fault, you are creating a small disincentive for that behavior. The desire to avoid the unpleasantness of marking a black spot becomes a subtle motivation to avoid the fault in the first place. You are, in essence, training your own brain. As the week progresses, you find that your resolve is strongest in the morning and tends to fade as the day wears on. Willpower, you realize, is a finite resource. It gets depleted by decisions, temptations, and frustrations. This observation is remarkably ahead of its time. The concept of decision fatigue or ego depletion won't be formally studied by psychologists for another 250 years, but you are discovering it through your own self-experimentation in your Philadelphia print shop. By the end of the week, the row for resolution is not clean, but it's better than the row for order. There are fewer black spots. You have demonstrated that you can force yourself to do things you don't feel like doing. You can stick to a plan, at least some of the time. You've also learned that resolution is a double-edged sword. Applied rigidly, it can lead to a narrow, joyless existence. The key, you begin to suspect, is not just to be resolute, but to be resolute about the right things. The challenge isn't just performing what you resolve, but resolving to perform what is truly worthwhile. It's a subtle but profound shift in your thinking. The system is not just a set of rules to be followed blindly. It's a tool that requires wisdom and judgment in its application. Now, your project moves from the internal world of your mind and habits into the very practical realm of your wallet. You've tackled what you eat, what you say, how you organize your space, and how you apply your will. Next on the list are the virtues that are deeply intertwined: frugality and the one you just finished, resolution. You decide to keep resolution in your mind, but your official focus for the week is frugality. Make no expense but to do good to others or yourself. Waste nothing. This virtue resonates with you deeply. It's not just a moral ideal, it's a survival strategy. You are a young businessman, still paying off the debt you incurred to set up your own shop. Every penny you save is a brick in the foundation of your financial independence. In the competitive, credit-driven economy of Philadelphia, a reputation for being careful with money is more valuable than gold. You begin the week by scrutinizing every aspect of your life through the lens of frugality. Your food is already simple, thanks to your week on Temperance, so that's an easy win. But you look at other things. The tallow candles you use at night. Could you get by with one instead of two? The small scraps of paper left over from a printing job. You've always saved them, but now you resolve to find a use for every last one, perhaps for jotting down notes or figuring accounts. Your clothes come under inspection. Your leather apron is worn but still functional. Your waistcoat has a small, barely noticeable fraying at the pocket. The temptation to buy a new one, to present a more prosperous image, is strong, but you resist. Waste nothing, the rule says. A new waistcoat would be a waste. You ask a neighbor, a seamstress, to mend the pocket for a small fee. It's a tiny act of frugality, but it reinforces the mindset. This is where you embody the spirit of your famous creation, Poor Richard. For years in your almanac, you've been writing aphorisms about thrift. A penny saved is a penny earned. Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship. Now, you are living them with renewed, systematic vigor. The real test of frugality, however, is not in these small personal savings, but in your business. A paper supplier offers you a discount on a large shipment of high-quality, imported Dutch paper. It's a good deal, and the paper would make your printing look magnificent. The old you might have jumped at the chance, perhaps even borrowing money to secure the stock. But you pause. You apply the rule, make no expense but to do good to others or yourself. Will this expensive paper do good? It will make your work look better, which is good for you. But is it necessary? You have a cheaper, perfectly adequate supply of paper from a local mill. Your customers are happy with the quality. The expensive paper is a luxury, not a necessity. To buy it would be a form of waste, a violation of frugality. You politely decline the supplier's offer. This decision feels significant. You are consciously choosing long-term financial stability over short-term flashiness. It's a quiet, unglamorous choice, but it fills you with a sense of solid, self-reliant strength. This focus on frugality had a very public, and somewhat comical, demonstration that people in Philadelphia noticed. You started transporting the paper you bought from the merchants to your print shop yourself, using a wheelbarrow. This was highly unusual. A man of your standing, a business owner, would normally hire a porter for such a task. To be seen doing manual labor like that was considered beneath your station. But you did it anyway. And your reasoning, as you later explained, was a masterclass in combining virtue with public relations. Firstly, it saved you the cost of hiring a porter, a clear act of frugality. Secondly, it was good exercise, a benefit to yourself. But most importantly, it was a performance. You knew people would see you. You knew they would talk. And the story they would tell was not Ben Franklin is too poor to hire a porter, but Ben Franklin is so industrious and frugal that he is not too proud to push his own wheelbarrow. It became a powerful piece of personal branding. It showed potential creditors that you were a safe bet, a man who didn't waste his money on frivolous appearances. This wheelbarrow story is a perfect example of the is it sincere or is it marketing debate that surrounds your project. Did you push the wheelbarrow purely to save a few pence? Or did you do it because you calculated the immense reputational benefit? The answer, as always with you, is probably both. You were a man who understood that in the theater of public life, you are always sending a message. You simply decided to make that message one of sober, reliable thrift. This pragmatic approach, however, also had a lesser-known, more rigid side. Some of your acquaintances found your frugality to be extreme, bordering on miserly. A friend once lamented that while you were happy to lend money for business ventures, you were famously reluctant to lend small sums for personal, non-essential reasons. This was because you were unkind. It was because your system defined such an expense as waste. You were applying your moral algorithm, and sometimes the results seemed cold to others. At the end of the week, you review your little book. The road for frugality is remarkably clean. It's a virtue that aligns perfectly with your circumstances and your ambitions. It feels less like a struggle and more like common sense. You realize that frugality and the previous virtue, resolution, are a powerful pair. It takes resolution to resist the temptation of a needless expense. It takes resolution to choose the harder, more frugal path. And as you look ahead to the next virtue industry, you see how they all lock together. Frugality saves you money. Resolution keeps you on task, and industry will be the engine that makes the money in the first place. Your system is beginning to feel less like a random list of virtues and more like a carefully designed machine, with each part connected to the next, working together to build a life of purpose and prosperity. The virtues are beginning to build on each other, creating a powerful momentum. You've regulated your body with temperance, your tongue with silence, your space with order, your will with resolution, and your finances with frugality. Now comes the virtue that fuels your entire enterprise industry. The precept is short and potent. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary actions. This is a virtue you feel you were born for. You are a naturally industrious person. It's what allowed you, a boy with only 2 years of formal schooling, to become one of the most learned men of your time. It's what has driven you to build your business from scratch. But this week, you are not just going to be industrious, you are going to be systematically, ruthlessly industrious. Your day is already structured by the schedule you created during your week on order. Now, you approach that schedule with a new level of intensity. Lose no time. This means the transitions between tasks become critical. The moment you finish your breakfast, you are not to linger. You move directly to the print shop. The 2-hour midday block for read or overlook my accounts. And dine is not a lazy lunch break, it is a scheduled period of productivity. You eat your frugal meal quickly, then immediately turn to your books or to the study of languages. You become a warrior against unnecessary actions. You notice the small ways you waste time, the moments spent staring out the window, the 5 minutes it takes to find a tool because you didn't put it back properly, a lingering ghost of your struggle with order. The temptation to reread a particularly entertaining passage in a newspaper when you should be moving on to the next task. You begin to see your day as a finite resource, a bag of 40 minutes that, once spent, are gone forever. Your print shop becomes a hive of focused activity. The rhythmic clatter of the press, the click-clack of type being set, the rustle of paper, these are the sounds of industry. You demand it of yourself, and you expect it of your apprentice. You instruct him on how to work more efficiently, how to anticipate the next step in a job, how to clean the type forms while the press is running the next sheet. You are not just managing a business, you are optimizing a workflow. This relentless drive leads to one of your most famous and slightly quirky personal habits. You are a passionate reader, but buying books is expensive, a violation of frugality. Borrowing them is an option, but you often have to return them before you've had time to fully absorb them. So, you develop a system. When you borrow a book you find particularly valuable, you will sometimes stay up all night to read it, so you can return it promptly the next morning. This is an almost superhuman feat of industry. It allows you to acquire knowledge without acquiring possessions, satisfying 2 of your key virtues at once. However, this intense focus on useful employment has a side effect that historians sometimes debate. Does it leave any room for pure, aimless leisure? For daydreaming? For the kind of unstructured, playful thinking that often leads to creative breakthroughs? The schedule has a block for diversion or conversation, but even that feels purposeful. Some scholars argue that your system, if followed to the letter, might actually stifle a certain kind of creativity. They suggest that your greatest creative moments, your scientific discoveries, your ingenious inventions, came when you allowed yourself to break your own rules, to follow a thread of curiosity without worrying if it was useful. The you in the middle of this week-long experiment doesn't have time for such debates. You are too busy working. You discover that industry is its own reward. The satisfaction of a long, productive day is immense. It leaves no room for melancholy or anxiety. At night, you are so physically and mentally tired that you fall asleep almost instantly, a simple, dreamless sleep. But even in a week dedicated to a virtue you excel at, the little book demands its due. One afternoon you find yourself utterly engrossed in a new volume of poetry. It's beautiful, moving, and intellectually stimulating. But is it useful in the same way that a book on accounting or navigation is? You spend an hour longer with the poetry than your schedule allows. That evening, you sit with your little book, pen in hand, and you hesitate. Was that wasted time? Was it an unnecessary action? According to the strict, utilitarian definition you set for yourself, it probably was. It didn't directly contribute to your business or civic project. With a sigh, you place a small black spot in the row for industry. It's a reluctant admission that even your most noble pursuits can conflict with your rigid system. This single black spot reveals the complexity of your project. It's not a simple battle between good and bad habits. It's a negotiation between different kinds of good. The good of art versus the good of commerce. The good of intellectual pleasure versus the good of strict time management. As the week of industry concludes, you feel a deep sense of accomplishment. You have produced a remarkable amount of work. Your business is thriving. You are tired but fulfilled. You've also learned that useful is a more complicated word than you thought. You look at the next virtue on your list, sincerity. After a week of such intense, inward focus on your own productivity, you now have to turn your attention outward to your interactions with other people. You have been building the engine of your success with frugality and industry. Now you must consider the fuel that makes it run in a society built on trust, your own good name. Your journey of self-improvement now pivots from the private realm of your workshop and your ledger book to the public stage of human interaction. The next virtue is sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit. Think innocently, unjustly. And if you speak, speak accordingly. This is about aligning your inner thoughts with your outer words. In a city like Philadelphia, a commercial hub where reputations are built and destroyed in the coffee houses, this virtue is not a matter of saintly purity, but of profound practical wisdom. You begin the week hyper-aware of the small, everyday deceptions that pepper conversation. The casual flattery you might pay a wealthy patron. The slight exaggeration you might use to make a story more entertaining. The way you might soften your criticism of a friend's bad idea to avoid giving offense. You now see these not as harmless social graces, but as small failures of sincerity. Your first challenge arrives in the form of a customer. He wants you to print a series of political pamphlets that are fiercely critical of a rival faction in the Pennsylvania Assembly. As you read the manuscript, you find it to be filled with half-truths, personal attacks, and inflammatory rhetoric. It is precisely the kind of divisive, hurtful speech your virtue of sincerity warns against. Financially, it's a good job. Refusing it means turning away guaranteed income. The old you, the purely pragmatic businessman, might have taken the job with the justification that a printer is just a neutral conduit for the opinions of others. But the you in the middle of this moral project cannot. You tell the customer that you cannot in good conscience print the pamphlets as they are written. You explain that your printing press is a powerful tool, and you feel a responsibility not to use it to spread what you believe to be unjust and harmful accusations. This is a risky move. The customer is furious. He accuses you of being a censor, of taking sides in the political debate. He storms out of your shop, threatening to take his business and that of his powerful friends elsewhere. You stand there for a moment, the silence of the shop ringing in your ears. Your heart is pounding. You have just sacrificed profit and potentially made a powerful enemy, all for the sake of an abstract principle. But then, a strange sense of calm settles over you. You have been true to yourself. You have aligned your actions with your beliefs. This feeling of inner coherence, you realize, is a reward in itself. This incident and others like it form the bedrock of your public reputation. Word of your refusal gets around. Your political opponents hear of it. While they may not agree with your own politics, they develop a respect for your integrity. Other customers, those who value fairness and honesty, are drawn to you. You begin to understand that sincerity, while it might have short-term costs, is an invaluable long-term investment in the most important asset you own, your good name. This leads to a fascinating little-known practice you adopted in your printing business. When you were asked to print something controversial that you didn't personally agree with, but which you also didn't find to be hurtfully deceitful, you sometimes came up with a clever compromise. You would agree to print it, but you would insist that the author's name be clearly attached to it. If they refused to put their own name on their work, you would often refuse the job. This was your sincerity test. If an author was sincere enough to stand behind their own words, why should you lend your press to them? This practice, however, has led to some debate among historians. Was this a principled stand for sincerity and accountability? Or was it a clever way to avoid taking the political heat for controversial publications? By forcing the author to take ownership, you could still collect the printing fee while distancing yourself from the content. It's a classic example of your ability to merge a high-minded principle with a shrewd business tech. The line between your virtue and your pragmatism is, as always, wonderfully blurry. The second part of the precept, think innocently, unjustly, is a much harder, more internal struggle. It's not just about what you say, it's about your private thoughts. You catch yourself thinking cynical thoughts about a competitor's motives. You find yourself making a snap, negative judgment about a stranger on the street. To combat this, you start a new mental exercise. When you find yourself thinking an unjust thought, you consciously stop and challenge it. You force yourself to consider alternative, more generous interpretations of people's actions. Is your competitor acting out of malice, or is he simply trying to provide for his family, just like you? Is the angry customer who haggled over a few pence a greedy man, or is he perhaps facing financial troubles you know nothing about? This practice of thinking justly is a profound form of mental discipline. It is an internal war against your own prejudices and snap judgments. It makes you a more empathetic, more understanding person. And as a practical benefit, it makes you a better businessman. By trying to understand the other person's perspective, you become a better negotiator and a more astute judge of character. As the week ends, the row for sincerity in your little book is not perfect, but it is a source of pride. The black spots represent failures, a white light told to avoid a tedious social engagement, a moment of uncharitable thought. But the empty spaces represent real, difficult victories. They represent the angry customer turned away, the gossip not repeated, the cynical thought challenged and replaced with a more just one. You have learned that sincerity is not a passive state of being honest. It is the active, constant work of aligning your heart, your mind, and your tongue. It is the foundation of trust, and you realize that trust, more than paper and ink, is the true currency of your life and your business. Your quest for moral perfection, so far a deeply personal and often solitary endeavor, is about to be put to a public test. You are not an island. You are a social creature, and the intellectual heart of your social life is a club you founded several years earlier, the Juntu. This small group of like-minded tradesmen and artisans, a cabinetmaker, a surveyor, a clerk, meets every Friday evening to discuss morals, politics, and natural philosophy, and to advance their mutual interests. The Juntu is your laboratory for ideas, and this week, your ideas about virtue will be stress-tested by your closest friends. There is no specific virtue for this week. Instead, you are in a period of review, trying to practice all the virtues you focused on so far. And as you prepare for the Friday meeting, you feel a sense of apprehension. The Juntu is a place of lively, sometimes sharp-edged debate. It is a place where your commitment to silence will be challenged, your sincerity tested, and your carefully constructed inner order threatened by the passionate chaos of intellectual combat. The meeting is held in a private room at a tavern. The air is thick with the smell of clay pipes and ale. As your friends arrive, the conversation is immediately energetic. A debate erupts over a recent proposal in the assembly to pave more of the city's streets. One member, a staunch fiscal conservative, argues against the expense. Another, a forward-thinking merchant, argues that the cost will be repaid tenfold in improved commerce and public health. In the past, you would have jumped into the fray immediately, armed with clever arguments and a love for the sport of debate. You had a reputation within the group for being a formidable, sometimes pugnacious debater. You loved to trap your opponents in logical paradoxes and point out the flaws in their reasoning. But tonight, you are different. You have weeks of practice in silence, temperance, and sincerity behind you. You listen more than you speak. You drink water while your friends drink kale. And when you do speak, you choose your words with a new kind of care. Instead of directly contradicting the member who opposes the paving project, you employ a new technique, one that you are consciously developing. You begin by acknowledging the validity of his concerns about the cost. You agree that the public purse must be guarded carefully. Then, instead of stating your own opinion as fact, you frame it as a series of questions. I wonder, you say calmly, if we have fully considered the cost of not paving the streets, the cost of broken wagon wheels, of horses lamed by the mud, of goods damaged in transit. Might it be that paving is not an expense but an investment, one that saves us money in the long run? This method is revolutionary in its effect. It depersonalizes the argument. You are no longer attacking your friend's position. You are inviting him to join you in a mutual inquiry. His defensiveness melts away. He is forced to consider the question on its merits. This Socratic method of leading with questions rather than assertions becomes one of your signature persuasive techniques, a tool you will use to great effect throughout your life in politics and diplomacy. This is a direct result of your virtue project. Your practice of silence has taught you to listen. Your practice of sincerity has taught you to value truth over victory. And your future state goal of humility, which you haven't officially added yet, but is beginning to form in your mind, is teaching you to subordinate your own ego for the sake of a more productive conversation. However, the junto also exposes the immense difficulty of your project. At one point, the conversation turns to a piece of local gossip, a juicy, unconfirmed rumor about a public official. The story is too good not to share, and for a moment, the old you surfaces. You contribute a witty, slightly cynical comment. The moment the words leave your mouth, you regret it. It was trifling conversation. It was a failure of silence. It was a failure of sincerity, as you were speaking of something you did not know to be true. Later that night, your little book will receive another black spot. This constant, public testing is what makes your project more than just a private fantasy. It's being forged in the fire of real-world interactions, and it leads to one of the most interesting scholarly debates about the junto itself. Was it truly a club of equals, a leather apron society for mutual improvement, or was it, from the beginning, a vehicle for your own ambitions? Historians have noted that you carefully selected the members. You brought them together. You wrote the rules of conversation, and you proposed most of the topics for discussion. The club's activities often dovetailed perfectly with your own civic and business interests. When you wanted to start a subscription library, you first proposed the idea to the junto. The members became the library's first subscribers and its most vocal champions. So was the junto a noble experiment in collective enlightenment, or was it a brilliantly disguised focus group and networking machine for your own projects? The answer, as is so often the case with you, is that it was both. You were genuinely passionate about mutual improvement. You believed deeply in the power of conversation and collective action. But you were also a brilliant strategist who understood that your own success was tied to the success of your community. By helping your friends, you were helping yourself. Doing good, as you defined it in your virtue of frugality, applied to your social capital as well as your financial capital. As the junta meeting winds down, you feel a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. You have succeeded in some areas and failed in others. You have tested your new, more virtuous self in your own social laboratory. You have seen how your personal project can have a powerful effect on others, guiding a contentious debate toward a productive conclusion, and your friends have, without knowing it, served as your quality control inspectors, their arguments on temptations revealing the remaining flaws in your character. The little book in your pocket feels heavier tonight, not just with the weight of its new black spots, but with the weight of shared ideas and tested principles. Your quest now turns from the nuances of conversation to the bedrock of civil society. The next virtue on your list is justice, wrong none by doing injuries, or omitting the benefits that are your duty. This virtue feels different from the others. Temperance and industry were largely about managing yourself. Sincerity and silence were about managing your interactions. Justice is about your fundamental obligations to the world around you. It's a concept so vast, so profound, it's almost paralyzing. How does one practice justice on a Tuesday afternoon in Philadelphia? You realize you must break it down into small, everyday actions. The first part of the precept, wrong none by doing injuries, seems straightforward. It's about not cheating people, not slandering them, not causing them harm. As a printer, this means giving your customers a fair price. It means paying your suppliers on time. It means not printing libelous attacks on your competitors. These are the basic ethics of business, and you find that your previous weeks of practice, especially in frugality and sincerity, have already paved the way for this. But it's the second half of the precept that truly challenges you, or omitting the benefits that are your duty. This is a radical and demanding idea. It implies that injustice is not just about the bad things you do, but also about the good things you fail to do. It's a sin of omission, not just commission. What then are the benefits that are your duty? An opportunity to explore this question arrives in a very mundane form. Your apprentice makes a costly mistake. He incorrectly sets the type for a legal form, and you don't catch the error until after 100 copies have been printed. The paper is wasted. The time is lost. Your first, instinctive reaction is anger. You want to lash out, to dock his pay, to make him understand the severity of his carelessness. That would be the justice of a master to an apprentice in this era. But you pause. You take a breath, a silent nod to your future virtue of tranquility. And you think about justice. Is yelling at the boy a benefit that is your duty? No, your duty is to teach him To injure his pride or his small income would be a failure of justice. So, you calmly show him the error. You explain the consequences, the cost of the wasted paper and labor. Then you make him go through the process of correcting the type and reprinting the forms himself, under your supervision. It takes longer. It costs you more of your own time, but the lesson sticks. The boy learns something about diligence and attention to detail that no amount of shouting could ever have taught him. You have not omitted the benefit that was your duty, the benefit of education. This small private moment in your print shop is a microcosm of a larger philosophy you are developing. Your sense of justice is deeply practical and community-oriented, and it soon finds a much larger stage. You start to notice the inefficiencies and dangers of your city, not as mere annoyances, but as collective injustices. The city has no professional fire watch. Fires are a constant threat, and when they break out, the response is a chaotic scramble of volunteers. This, you realize, is an omission of a benefit that is the community's duty to itself. People are being injured, losing their homes, their businesses, their lives because of this collective failure. So, you act. You use your printing press and your influence in the Jung too. You write an article in your newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, about the dangers of fire and the need for better organization. You don't just complain, you propose a solution. You call for the creation of a volunteer fire department with proper equipment and a formal structure. This is where your concept of justice becomes revolutionary. For many of your contemporaries, justice was something dispensed by a court, a matter of punishing criminals and settling disputes. For you, it is proactive. It is about building systems that prevent injury and create benefits. You are transforming justice from a purely reactive concept into a constructive, civic one. This effort, of course, runs into a fascinating historical debate, where your famous civic improvement projects, the fire department, the library, the university, the hospital, born from a pure, altruistic sense of justice, or were they also a brilliant form of political maneuvering? Some historians argue the former, seeing you as the quintessential enlightened citizen, using reason and persuasion to improve the human condition. Others, however, point out that every one of these projects enhanced your own power and influence. By founding the fire department, you became its leader. By proposing the library, you became its chief organizer. These projects placed you at the center of a growing network of civic institutions, making you one of the most powerful men in Pennsylvania, all without ever holding high elected office. Were you doing good, or were you doing well? Or, as you seem to prove time and again, was it possible to do both at the same time? You also encounter the limits of your own sense of justice. You live in a society that practices and profits from the enslavement of African people. You yourself have run ads in your newspaper for the sale of enslaved individuals and have owned at least 2 enslaved persons in your household. During this week, as you meditate on the words wrong none by doing injuries, how do you reconcile this? This is a question that you, and the historical record you leave behind, wrestle with imperfectly. In your younger years, you largely accepted the institution as a fact of life. There is no entry in your little book where you mark a black spot for the fundamental injustice of slavery. It is, for this period of your life, a moral blind spot. It is a stark reminder that even the most systematic attempt at moral perfection is a product of its time. Your definition of justice is broadened forward thinking in many ways, but it is not universal. It will take you many more decades of life experience, your time in London and Paris, and your exposure to the growing abolitionist movement, for your sense of justice to evolve and lead you to become the president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society in your final years. For now, your week in justice is a success within its own defined terms. You have wronged no one in your business dealings. You have transformed your relationship with your apprentice. You have planted the seed of a project that will benefit your entire city. The row for justice in your little book remains clean. But outside the pages of that book, in the wider world you inhabit, the demands of true and total justice remain vast, complex, and, for now, partially unmet. You have now been working on your grand project for 12 weeks. One by one, you have wrestled with temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, and justice, along with several others you've been tackling in between. Now you arrive at the end of the first full cycle. The 13th week is dedicated to the final virtue on your initial list, a virtue you haven't yet added but whose absence you are beginning to feel: humility. But before you can even begin to formally tackle that, you take stock. This week marks the completion of your first course. It's a time for review, reflection, and a touch of exhaustion. You sit down one evening, the little book in your hands. It feels heavier now, denser, not just with ink but with experience. You slowly turn the pages, looking back at the grids you so hopefully drew 13 weeks ago. Each page is a story. The page for Temperance is relatively clean, a testament to your early success. Silence is more speckled with the black dots of failure, a reminder of your talkative nature. And then there's the page for order. You look at the rows for order, and they are almost solid black. It looks like a document that has been ruthlessly censored. You can't help but smile wryly. It is a monument to a battle fought and lost, a battle you are still losing every single day. This review process is both encouraging and deeply humbling. On one hand, you can see real progress. You are more conscious of your habits, more deliberate in your actions. You have saved money, you have streamlined your business. You have improved your methods of argument. And you have even launched a major civic project. The system, in many ways, is working. You are, by any objective measure, a more effective and virtuous man than you were 13 weeks ago. On the other hand, the sheer number of black spots is staggering. You had entertained a flattering expectation, as you would later call it, that by the end of this first cycle, the book would be mostly clean. You imagined that as you strengthened one virtue, the others would naturally fall into line. The reality is much messier. The book is a battlefield, not a pristine temple. You realize that acquiring good habits is one thing, extinguishing bad ones is another thing entirely. They have a stubborn, persistent life of their own. You are, in essence, experiencing the plateau of latent potential that modern habit formation experts talk about. You've put in a tremendous amount of effort, but the results are not yet as dramatic as you'd hoped. The breakthrough to a clean book seems as far away as ever. This is a critical moment. It's the point at which most people would give up. The initial enthusiasm has worn off, and the reality of the long, slow grind has set in. The goal of moral perfection now seems not just distant, but laughably impossible. And this leads you to a profound insight. Perhaps the goal was never the point. Perhaps the process is the point. The daily struggle, the nightly review, the constant self-awareness, that is what is changing you. The value of the project is not in achieving a perfect, spotless page, but in the person you become while striving for it. It's a subtle shift in perspective, but it's what allows you to continue. You are not failing at being perfect. You are succeeding at being better. This realization connects to a long-running debate among those who study your life and work. Was your project an expression of enlightenment, optimism, or a holdover of your Puritan ancestry? The Puritans of New England, from whom you were descended, were obsessed with moral self-examination. They kept detailed diaries, constantly searching their souls for signs of sin and grace. Theirs was a world of moral anxiety, driven by the fear of damnation. Your project, on its face, seems to be the opposite. It's rational, secular, and optimistic. You believe you can engineer your own character through reason and practice, no divine intervention required. Yet, some historians argue that the method, the obsessive tracking, the nightly accounting of faults, the relentless pursuit of self-improvement, is deeply Puritan in its DNA. You have, in a sense, taken the form of Puritan self-scrutiny and replaced its theological content with the secular philosophy of the Enlightenment. You've created a system of self-improvement that is, as one scholar memorably put it, a Puritanism without God. As you sit there with your book, you don't think in such grand historical terms. You are simply a man taking stock of his own soul. You decide that the system needs a tweak. 13 weeks is too long to go without giving each virtue a focused dose of attention. You resolve to shorten the cycle. One 13-week course a year is not enough. You will aim for 4 courses a year, a constant rotation through the virtues, reinforcing them over and over. You also realize something is missing from your list. As you reflect on your interactions in the John to win with your customers, you notice a recurring problem. Your friends have told you that even when you are proven right in an argument, you can be insufferable. You have a tendency to be overbearing to make your intellectual superiority felt. You are proud of your logical mind, proud of your self-discipline, proud of this very project. And pride, you realize, is the most insidious vice of all. It can even feed on your attempts to be virtuous. You need a new virtue, the last one, the one that will moderate all the others. Humility. You don't have the famous precept for it yet. Imitate Jesus and Socrates. That will come later. For now, you just know that this is the next frontier. Having spent 13 weeks trying to build yourself up, you now see that the next crucial step is to learn how to keep your own ego in check. The first cycle is over. The second is about to begin, with a new and profoundly difficult challenge at its end. You are sitting in the quiet of your shop. The first 13-week course completed, the little book lying open on your desk. You're not focused on any single virtue right now. Instead, you're looking at the structure of the project itself. You're looking at the grids, the schedule, the nightly questions. And a new, startling thought occurs to you. A thought that reframes the entire endeavor. You haven't just been practicing virtue. You've been building a machine. This isn't a project of the heart. Not really. It's a project of the mind. It's an invention. It's a piece of engineering as carefully designed as a new, more efficient stove or a clock. You look at the components, the clearly defined goals, the 13 virtues, the methodical, one-at-a-time approach, the daily data tracking, the black spots, the regular performance reviews, the end-of-week reflection. You realize you have created a system, an algorithm for self-improvement. This is the moment when you become, for lack of a better term, the world's first true life hacker. You are treating your own character as a problem to be solved, a process to be optimized. You are applying the principles of science and engineering to the messy, unpredictable landscape of the human soul. You haven't invented a new morality. You've invented a new technology for it. The daily schedule you created isn't just a to-do list. It's a form of what future generations will call time blocking, allocating a specific purpose to every hour of the day to maximize output and minimize wasted cycles. Your focus on one virtue per week is a form of habit stacking, building new behaviors on top of each other in a manageable sequence. The little black spots are a feedback loop, providing immediate, visual data on your performance. Your entire life is becoming a series of these small, clever hacks. It's not just about morals. You apply the same mindset to everything. Consider how you taught yourself to write. You didn't just read and hope for the best. You took articles from The Spectator, a publication you admired. You would read one, jot down notes on the general meaning of each sentence, then set the original aside. A few days later, you would try to reconstruct the article in your own words, using your notes. Finally, you would compare your version to the original, correcting your awkward phrasing and clumsy vocabulary. It was a slow, analytical, almost mechanical process of reverse engineering good prose. It was a writing hack. This extends to a lesser-known but equally telling example, your method for learning foreign languages. When you decided to learn French, Italian, and Spanish, you didn't just study grammar tables. You found a book you had already read and loved in English, a book of fables, for instance. Then you got a copy in the language you wanted to learn. Because you already knew the story, you could focus entirely on the vocabulary and sentence structure, picking up the language intuitively. It was another clever shortcut, a system for optimizing learning. As you sit there, you feel a surge of intellectual pride in your system, a feeling that immediately alerts you to the necessity of that new virtue, humility. But the pride is undeniable. It's the pride of an inventor looking at his creation and seeing that it works. This is the very essence of your genius, and it's what makes you a controversial figure for historians. The great debate about you isn't about the facts of your life, but about the motivation behind them. Was this systematic approach to life, a sincere quest for self-mastery, a way to become a truly good person for the sake of goodness itself? Or was it the ultimate tool for worldly success? Some scholars see you as the patron saint of the self-help movement, a genuine believer in the power of rational self-improvement. They argue that you saw becoming a better person as the noblest goal a human could pursue. They believe your little book was a private document for a private spiritual journey. Other historians, however, take a more cynical view. They see you as the inventor of personal branding. They argue that this entire virtue project was a calculated strategy to build a reputation for reliability, industry, and integrity, all of which were essential for a young entrepreneur in a small, credit-based economy. In this view, the little book washed a mirror for your soul. It was a script for the public character you were playing. Appearing virtuous was more important than being virtuous. Was the system a hack for your character, or a hack for your career? The truth, you suspect, is that you wouldn't even understand the distinction. To you, becoming a better person and becoming a more successful person are not separate goals. They are the same goal. A man who is industrious, frugal, and sincere is a better man, and he will also, inevitably, be a more successful one. The system is designed to optimize both. It's a single tool for a single project, the building of a successful life. This realization doesn't diminish the project. It clarifies it. You see that the system is powerful. It has the potential to reshape not just your own life, but the lives of others, if they were to adopt it. The thought of publishing it one day flickers in your mind, but you dismiss it for now. It is still a work in progress, an experiment with a sample size of 1. And the experiment is about to enter its most challenging phase. You have built a powerful engine for self-improvement, but an engine without a governor can tear itself apart. You now understand that your own pride, your satisfaction in your own cleverness, is the greatest threat to the entire system. Your next target, humility, isn't just another virtue on the list. It's the crucial update that will keep your entire operating system from crashing. You are now in your second 13-week cycle, revisiting the virtues with a new layer of understanding. You've worked your way through temperance, silence, and the dreaded order once more, and now you arrive at a virtue that feels like the quiet, sensible heart of the entire project, moderation. The precept you've set is, avoid extremes, forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. This virtue is a subtle one. It's not about doing or not doing something specific. It's about how you do everything else. It's a master control knob for all the other virtues. You can be too temperate, becoming ascetic and withdrawn. You can be too frugal, becoming a miser. You can be too industrious, burning yourself out and neglecting your health and family. Moderation is the governor on the engine, the wisdom that keeps the whole system from flying apart. The first part of the rule, avoid extremes, seems simple enough, but you quickly find it applies to your successes as much as your failures. You've had a good few weeks in your business. A large and profitable contract to print government documents has come through. The old you might have celebrated with a lavish dinner or the purchase of some new luxury. Your practice of temperance and frugality has already curbed that impulse. But moderation goes deeper. It's not just about avoiding the extreme of extravagance. It's also about avoiding the extreme of pride and self-satisfaction. You make the conscious choice to treat this success as just another part of the process. You don't boast about it at the coffee house. You don't allow it to make you complacent. You simply bank the profit, pay down a bit more of your debt, and move on to the next job. You are learning to moderate your emotional reactions to both success and failure. The second part of the precept is where the real work lies. Forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. This is a profound psychological challenge. It asks you to override one of the most basic human instincts, the desire for retribution. An opportunity to practice this presents itself almost immediately. A rival printer, a man who has been a competitor for years, publishes a short, anonymous piece in his own newspaper that subtly mocks your civic improvement projects, suggesting they are motivated by vanity. Your face flushes with anger as you read it. It is an injury. It's unjust, and your mind immediately begins composing a brilliant, witty, and utterly devastating reply that you could publish in your own gazette. You could expose him as the author, ridicule his arguments, and leave his reputation in tatters. You feel he deserves it. But then the word forbear echoes in your mind. Moderation. You force yourself to stop. You take a walk down to the banks of the Delaware River, the cool breeze helping to clear your head. You analyze the situation not with passion, but with the cool logic of your system. What is the most useful response? A public feud might be entertaining for the city, but it would be ugly and divisive. It would consume your time and energy, violating the rule of industry. It would likely involve hurtful deceit and passionate exaggeration, violating sincerity. And it would certainly not be an act of tranquility. Attacking him would violate nearly all your other virtues. The wisest, most moderate course of action is to do nothing at all, to let the insult pass, to rise above it. This is incredibly difficult. Your ego is screaming for satisfaction, but your rational mind, guided by the principle of moderation, holds it in check. You return to your shop, and you get back to work. You let the injury go, not because you don't deserve your resentment, but because you don't deserve the corrosive effects of holding on to it. This practice of moderating your resentment has a fascinating and little-known side effect on your social life. People begin to see you as unflappable. Because you don't rise to the bait, you gain a reputation for being calm, steady, and above petty squabbles. This paradoxically makes you more powerful. Your opinion carries more weight because people know it isn't colored by personal animosity or momentary passion. By choosing not to fight, you often win. Of course, this raises a question for historians. Is this truly a forbearance of resentment, a kind of saintly forgiveness? Or is it a cold, calculated strategy? Are you forgiving your enemies, or are you simply concluding that ignoring them is a more effective way to defeat them? Some scholars argue that your moderation is less about inner peace and more about a pragmatic understanding of power dynamics. You realize that a public tantrum was a sign of weakness and that quiet, unshakable confidence was the ultimate power move. For you, in this moment, it feels like both. It is a moral victory that also happens to be the smartest strategic play. The line is always blurry. The struggle to avoid extremes also applies to the project itself. You look again at the blackened rows for order in your little book. Your initial approach was extreme, perfect, absolute order. The result was extreme failure. A more moderate approach, you now realize, would be more successful. You amend the goal. You will not aim for a perfectly tidy shop at all times. You will aim for a workably tidy shop, a state of organization that is efficient but not obsessive. You will allow for a certain amount of creative chaos. This is a breakthrough. You are learning to apply moderation to your own system, making it more flexible, more human, and ultimately, more sustainable. You are moving from a rigid, dogmatic adherence to the rules to a wiser, more balanced application of their spirit. As the week ends, you feel a new sense of equilibrium. Moderation has acted as a balm on your ambitions, soothing your pride and calming your resentments. It has taught you that the path to virtue is not a straight, narrow, and unforgiving line, but a wider, more flexible road. It's the middle way. The little book shows fewer black spots for the weak. Not because you've become perfect, but because you stop demanding an impossible, extreme version of perfection from yourself. After the subtle internal work of moderation, you turn to a virtue that is refreshingly concrete and external: cleanliness. The precept is simple and direct. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, CLOs, or habitation. On the surface, this seems like one of the easier virtues. It's a matter of soap, water, and a good broom. But as you immerse yourself in the world of 18th century Philadelphia, you realize that cleanliness is a radical and demanding act. Your city is not a clean place. The streets are a repository for garbage, animal waste, and the contents of chamber pots. The air in summer is thick with flies, and the general standard of personal hygiene is, by modern sensibilities, rather low. A full body bath is a rare event for most people, an undertaking that involves hauling and heating large amounts of water. For you, however, cleanliness is not just about aesthetics or sanitation, it's a reflection of your core philosophy. You believe that outer order reflects inner order. A clean environment, like an organized desk, which you're still working on, contributes to a clear and focused mind. You see a direct link between the physical and the mental. You begin with your habitation, the print shop, and your small attached living quarter. You dedicate an entire morning to a deep clean. You sweep not just the center of the floor, but the corners where dust and old scraps of paper accumulate. You wash the windows, letting in more natural light. You scrub the ink stains from the floorboards. The physical effort is satisfying, and the result is immediate and tangible. The shop feels brighter, more spacious, and more professional. Next, you turn to your CLOs. As a printer, your work is dirty. Ink has a way of getting everywhere, but you resolve to make a greater effort. You start wearing a heavier, more protected apron. You make sure your shirt is clean each morning. You take the time to properly brush your coat and polish your shoes before you go out. This attention to your appearance has an immediate social effect. People notice. In a world where many tradesmen are grimy from their work, your clean and tidy appearance stands out. It signals care, attention to detail, and self-respect. It utterly reinforces the brand you are so carefully building, that of a reliable, high-quality printer. A man who takes care of his clothes and his shop, the thinking goes, is a man who will take care of his customers' printing jobs. It's another small, practical benefit of a moral pursuit. The most personal, and perhaps most radical, part of your practice of this virtue is your attention to body. You become a great advocate for a rather unusual habit, the air bath. This is a practice you will follow for most of your life and recommend to others. Every morning, regardless of the season, you will spend some time sitting in your room, completely unclothed, letting the air circulate around your body. You believe it has great health benefits, a way of cleansing the skin when a full water bath is impractical. It's a quirky, eccentric habit, one of those little-known details that makes you so human. Imagine it, one of the 18th century's greatest minds, the future diplomat and statesman, starting his day not with a grand philosophical pronouncement, but by sitting naked in a chilly room, convinced HES improving his health. Your commitment to bodily cleanliness also famously extends to swimming. You have always been a strong swimmer, a skill you learned as a boy in Boston. You see swimming not just as a recreation, but as a form of cleansing and vigorous exercise, a way to wash away the grime and stagnation of the city. You find that your temperate, water-drinking diet gives you incredible stamina in the water. On a warm afternoon, you might slip away to the Schuylkill River for a swim, returning to your work refreshed and invigorated. It's a perfect synergy of your virtues, temperance industry, as it improves your fitness for work, and cleanliness all rolled into one. But as with all your virtues, this one creates a debate for future historians. How much of your focus on cleanliness was driven by a genuine belief in its connection to moral and mental clarity, and how much was a performance? Some scholars argue it was deeply philosophical. They connect it to the Enlightenment's emphasis on light, clarity, and order. By cleaning your windows, you were literally and metaphorically letting in the light of reason. You were pushing back against the darkness and chaos of the physical world. Other, more cynical historians suggest it was primarily about social mobility. In the 18th century, cleanliness was a powerful class signifier. The wealthy could afford the laundry services, the clean clothes, and the habits of hygiene that were out of reach for the poor. By adopting the appearance of a gentleman, even when you were a struggling leather-aproned tradesman, you were signaling your ambition and your suitability for a higher social station. Was it about being clean or being seen as clean? Was it hygiene or was it a hack to get ahead? As always, the answer is likely a pragmatic mix of both. You genuinely believe in the benefits of a clean and orderly environment, but you are also keenly aware of the impression it makes on others. You wouldn't see a contradiction here. Improving yourself and improving your standing in the world are one and the same project. The nightly review with the little book is a bit easier this week. Cleanliness is, for the most part, a matter of effort, not complex moral judgment. Did you wash? Are your clothes clean? Is the shop tidy? The answers are yes or no. The row in your book remains relatively free of black spots. This week of scrubbing, sweeping, and swimming leaves you feeling renewed. You have imposed a small bubble of order and clarity onto your immediate environment. It's a tangible victory in your ongoing war against chaos. As you move on to the next virtue, tranquility, you realize you have created the perfect physical space in which to cultivate a peaceful mind. You've cleaned the house, now it's time to clean the mind. Having tidied your finances, your workshop, and your body, you now turn to the most turbulent and elusive territory of all, your own mind. The next virtue on the docket is tranquility, Be not disturbed at trifles or at accidents common or unavoidable. This is the art of inner peace, the skill of maintaining a calm and untroubled mind in the midst of a chaotic world. And in the noisy, demanding, and often frustrating environment of 18th century Philadelphia, this is perhaps the most challenging virtue yet. Your laboratory for this experiment is, as always, your daily life. The trifles and accidents arrive on a relentless schedule. The week begins when a shipment of ink you ordered arrives, and it's the wrong kind. It's a trifle in the grand scheme of things, but it's a major annoyance that will delay a pressing job. Your initial reaction is a hot flash of anger. You want to dash off a furious letter to the supplier. Your mind starts racing, calculating the lost time and money. But then the word tranquility asserts itself. You consciously stop the downward spiral of agitation. You take a deep breath. You ask yourself, is getting angry going to change the ink? Will fuming about it solve the problem? The answer is obviously no. The only rational, useful response is to calmly assess the situation and figure out a solution. You send a polite but firm note to the supplier about the errand, then immediately set about trying to find a small quantity of the correct ink from a local competitor to tide you over. You have successfully transmuted a moment of potential rage into a moment of calm problem solving. It's a small victory, but it feels significant. You are learning to manage your emotional response to external events. You are discovering that while you cannot control what happens to you, you have some control over what happens in you. The city itself is a constant test of tranquility. The noise of cart wheels on cobblestones, the shouting of street vendors, the crying of a neighbor's baby, these are the common or unavoidable accidents of urban life. Previously, you might have let these things irritate you, seeing them as interruptions to your focus. Now, you practice a new mental technique. You try to accept them as part of the city's soundscape as a kind of urban weather that you can't change. You practice letting the sounds wash over you without snagging on your consciousness. It's an early, self-taught form of mindfulness meditation. This quest for tranquility leads you to a little-known personal habit that some of your friends find amusing. You become a great enthusiast of chess. You find that the intense focus required by the game is a powerful tool for quieting the mind. When you are concentrating on the board, there is no room for anxiety about your business or irritation at life's trifles. The game is a self-contained world of logic and order. It is a gymnasium for your mind, a place where you can practice concentration and calm strategic thinking. You will later write a famous essay called The Morals of Chess, in which you argue that the game teaches foresight, circumspection, and of course, the kind of calm temperament you are trying to cultivate. However, your pursuit of tranquility is not without its internal contradictions, a fact that has led to some scholarly debate. Your life is a whirlwind of activity. You are a printer, a writer, an inventor, a civic leader. You are constantly starting new projects, engaging in political debates, and pushing for reforms. Your life is, by any definition, the opposite of tranquil. So how do historians reconcile this? Was your praise of tranquility hypocritical? Some argue that you didn't seek a passive, Zen-like state of inaction. Your tranquility was a warrior's calm, not a monk's. It was about maintaining a cool head in the heat of battle. It was a tool for making you more effective in your whirlwind of activities, not a retreat from them. A calm general is a better general. Others suggest that the virtue was an antidote. Perhaps you pursued so many projects precisely because your mind was naturally restless and untranquil. Maybe the constant business ends was a way to outrun a native anxiety. In this view, the virtue of tranquility wasn't just a nice to have. It was a necessary medicine for a mind that was constantly in danger of spinning out of control. It was less a goal and more of a desperate coping mechanism. The nightly accounting in your little book is a brutal measure of your progress. The black spots for this week are numerous. A flash of anger at your apprentice for a clumsy mistake. A wave of anxiety about a looming debt payment. A frustrating argument at the junta that left you fuming for an hour afterward. You realize that your mind has a will of its own. Your moods and emotions are like unruly weather patterns, difficult to predict and even harder to control. You discover that achieving tranquility isn't about eliminating all negative feelings. That's impossible. It's about reducing their duration and their intensity. It's about closing the gap between the moment a trifle occurs and the moment you return to a state of calm. This week, the gap might be an hour. You resolve that next time you will try to make it 50 minutes, then 40. As the week ends, you are far from being a master of Zen like calm, but you have a new set of tools. You have the power of pausing, of questioning your own emotional reactions, of redirecting your mental energy. You have found in the game of chess a sanctuary for your busy mind. You are beginning to learn that the source of disturbance is not in the world, but in your reaction to it. You have not yet achieved consistent inner peace, but you have at least declared war on your own inner chaos. You are deep into your project now. Months have passed in this relentless, systematic pursuit of self-betterment. You've cycled through the virtues multiple times. You have tangible proof of your progress. Your business is more secure. Your reputation is growing. And you have initiated projects that are reshaping your city. By all external measures, the experiment is a resounding success. And yet a profound and unsettling feeling begins to creep in. A quiet, persistent doubt. It doesn't arrive with a bang, but as a slow, creeping fatigue. You are sitting at your desk late one evening, the little book open before you. You are going through the nightly ritual of examination. You mark a spot for a sharp word spoken in haste. You mark another for a moment of laziness. You mark a third for an uncharitable thought. The page is, as usual, speckled with the evidence of your own imperfection. And for the first time, you feel a sense of utter futility. You look back at the pages from your very first week. The pattern of faults is distressingly similar. You are still losing your temper. You are still struggling with order. You are still having to fight the urge to engage in trifling conversation. You have built a sophisticated system for tracking your faults, but the faults themselves seem to be an inexhaustible resource. For every one you manage to suppress, another seems to pop up in its place. The goal you set for yourself in that optimistic dawn, moral perfection, now seems like a cruel joke. It's like trying to sweep back the tide with a broom. You can work frantically, you can be diligent and systematic, but the ocean of human frailty is relentless. It keeps rolling in. This is your project's dark night of the soul. The initial enthusiasm is long gone. The novelty has worn off. Now all that's left is the cold, hard reality of the grind. And you begin to ask yourself the dangerous question, what is the point? You start to see the flaws not just in yourself, but in the system itself. It is rigid and unforgiving. It turns your life into a constant series of pass-fail tests. There is no room for grace, no allowance for a bad day, no understanding of the complexities of human emotion. It is a machine you have built, and you are beginning to feel like a cog within it. The system that was meant to liberate you now feels like a cage. You even begin to resent the little book. This pocket-sized tyrant, this silent, judgmental companion. It has made you so hyper-aware of your own feelings that it's hard to feel any simple, uncomplicated joy. When you have a pleasant conversation with a friend, a part of your mind is in the background, auditing your words, checking them against the rules of silent sincerity. When you enjoy a good meal, you're mentally calculating whether you are approaching the border of dullness. This leads to a little-known, and somewhat speculative, area of your biography that historians love to ponder. Did this relentless self-monitoring lead to periods of depression or burnout? Your autobiography presents the project as a steady, upward climb. But the reality of such an intense, lifelong psychological experiment must have been more complex. Some scholars suggest that your famous cheerful public persona might have been, in part, a mask for a more melancholic and self-critical private nature, a nature that this project both fed and fought against. Was the jovial drive, Franklin, a role you played to escape the relentless taskmaster you had created for yourself? During this period of doubt, you find yourself drawn to the writings of philosophers who expressed a more skeptical view of human perfectibility. You read about the cynical philosophers of ancient Greece who believed that virtue was a shaman's self-interest was the only true motivator. You ponder the theological doctrine of original sin from your Puritan heritage, the idea that humanity is inherently flawed and cannot achieve righteousness through its own efforts alone. For a time, you seriously consider abandoning the whole project. It's too hard. It's making you unhappy. The goal is impossible. Why continue the charade? You could just accept yourself for who you are, a reasonably decent but flawed man like everyone else. But then, as you reflect on what you would be giving up, you have another realization. You think about your life before the project began. You remember the youthful mistakes, the wasted time, the poor financial decisions, the arguments driven by ego rather than reason. You are, without a doubt, a better, happier, and more successful man with the project than you were without it. The problem, you conclude, is not the project itself. The problem is the goal. Moral perfection was the wrong target. It was a young man's arrogant, idealistic dream. A more mature, more realistic goal is needed. You will not achieve perfection. You will never have a perfectly clean book. But you can continue the process of improvement. You can continue to get a little bit better, day by day. You decide to shift your focus from the destination, perfection, to the journey, progress. This is a crucial turning point. You are making peace with your own imperfection. You are accepting that the struggle is permanent. And in this acceptance, you find a new kind of freedom. The project is no longer a rigid system for achieving an impossible goal. It becomes a more flexible, more forgiving companion. It's a compass to guide you, not a whip to punish you. You pick up the little boat. You still see the flaws, the black spots, but you no longer see them as signs of failure. You see them as data. You see them as opportunities for growth. The doubt has vanished entirely, but it has been transformed into a more realistic, more sustainable form of determination. You will continue, not because you expect to become a saint, but because you know that the effort itself is what makes a good life. Having weathered your crisis of faith in the project, you now approach the virtues with a renewed, more realistic sense of purpose. You turn your attention to one of the most delicate and private virtues on your list, chastity. The precept you have written for yourself is, rarely use veneer, why but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. This is a subject you approach with a unique mix of 18th century pragmatism and personal experience. You are not a naive idealist. In your youth, before your marriage, you had what you later discreetly referred to as erotic mistakes. You frequented the company of low women, and this period of your life resulted in the birth of your illegitimate son, William. This experience is not a source of pride for you. It was a great expense and a continual risk, a source of shame and complication. Your approach to chastity is therefore not born from a place of abstract purity, but from a very real, lived understanding of the consequences of its absence. Your definition of the virtue is remarkably clinical and practical. Notice the words you use, health or offspring. This is not about religious doctrine or romantic ideals. You are framing sexual activity as a biological function with specific, utilitarian purposes. The warnings against it, dullness, weakness, or the injury of reputation are also practical. You see unchecked lust as something that drains your energy, violating industry, clouds your judgment, violating tranquility, and damages your standing in the community, a major business liability. Practicing this virtue in the bustling, often body port city of Philadelphia requires a conscious effort. As a prominent printer and a sociable man, you move in many circles. The taverns are full of coarse jokes and propositions. The city has a thriving underground economy of desire. To navigate this world while adhering to your precept requires a deliberate and focused mind. Your primary strategy is avoidance. You consciously steer clear of the situations and company that you know from experience can lead to temptation. This is an application of your broader principle. It's easier to avoid a temptation than to resist it head-on. You pour your energy into your work, your civic projects, and your intellectual clubs. You find that a day filled with industry leaves little time or energy for the pursuit of veneer. Why? Your schedule, the one you designed for order, becomes a powerful tool for chastity as well. This virtue also profoundly shapes your relationship with your wife, Deborah. Your marriage is a partnership, a cornerstone of your business and your life. You see that an act of infidelity would not just be a personal moral failing, it would be an injury to her peace or reputation. It would be a profound injustice. Your commitment to chastity, therefore, becomes an act of loyalty and respect to your partner. It is about maintaining the stability and integrity of your most important relationship. Of course, your approach to this virtue has been a subject of intense scrutiny and debate by biographers and historians. Your relationship with Deborah was complex. You would spend many years in Europe without her, creating what was effectively a long-distance marriage. During your time in London and Paris, you were a celebrated figure, and you clearly enjoyed the company of intelligent, charming women. You had a famous flirtatious, though likely platonic, correspondence with several of them, most notably Madame Brillon and Madame Helvetius in France. So, did you maintain your virtue of chastity during those long years abroad? Most mainstream historians believe you did. They argue that your flirtations were a kind of intellectual and social performance, part of the persona of the charming, witty dry Franklin that you played so well in the French salons. They were games of wit, not acts of infidelity. Your writings from the period consistently emphasize your loyalty to Deborah and your desire to return home. However, a more skeptical school of thought exists. Some scholars find it hard to believe that a man with your known youthful passions, living for years in the sophisticated and liberal atmosphere of Paris, would have remained perfectly chaste. They point to the playful, sometimes risque, tone of your letters and suggest they hint at more than just friendship. Was your public persona of the faithful husband a carefully maintained fiction? The historical record is ultimately ambiguous, with no definitive proof either way. It remains one of the great what-if questions of your personal life. One of the most fascinating and little-known aspects of your thoughts on this subject comes from a private letter you wrote to a young friend seeking advice. The letter, which was suppressed for many years due to its scandalous content, is a shockingly pragmatic and even cynical take on the matter. In it, you state reasons why an older woman is preferable to a younger one as a mistress. The arguments are a mix of worldly wisdom and crude humor. It's a jarring document, seemingly at odds with the high-minded pursuit of virtue in your little book. How can the same man write the precept for chastity in this cynical letter? This is the Franklin paradox in its darkest form. Perhaps the letter was a joke, a piece of worldly wit not meant to be taken seriously. Or perhaps it reveals the ongoing tension within you, the idealist striving for moral perfection versus the worldly pragmatist who understood the messy realities of human desire. The little book represents the man you wanted to be, while the letter reflects the kind of cynical tavern talk you were trying to rise above. For now, within the confines of your life in Philadelphia, married and focused on your work, the virtue of chastity is relatively straightforward. It is about discipline, focus, and loyalty. It is about channeling your energies into useful pursuits. The road for chastity in your book remains clean, a testament to a life brought into a state of domestic and personal order. But the specter of your errata and the complexities of the years to come serve as a quiet reminder that this virtue, like all the others, is a matter of ongoing, and sometimes difficult, maintenance. You are nearing the end of your list, having wrestled with the grand and the gritty, from justice down to cleanliness. And now you arrive at the virtue that you added last, the one suggested by a Quaker friend who pointed out that you were, to put it mildly, not very good at it. The virtue is humility. And it is, you will soon discover, the most paradoxical and treacherous virtue of them all. Your friend's critique was sharp and insightful. He told you that you were proud of your opinions, and that you were overbearing in arguments. He said that when people disagreed with you, you were often quick to express contempt. This feedback stung, because you knew it was true. Your pride was the dark underbelly of your intellect and your ambition. So, you add humility to your list, and you give it a beautifully simple precept. Imitate Jesus and Socrates. This precept is a stroke of genius. It encapsulates the two great traditions of Western thought that you admire. Jesus represents spiritual humility, the meekness, the service to others, the turning of the other cheek. Socrates represents intellectual humility, the famous declaration that the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. He was a man who sought truth not by making pronouncements, but by asking questions. You begin your week on humility by changing your behavior in conversation, especially in the Jumtu. You make a conscious rule for yourself. You will no longer use words that imply a fixed, dogmatic opinion, words like certainly, undoubtedly, or I know. Instead, you will use softer, more tentative language. You will say, I conceive, I apprehend, or it appears to me at present. This simple change in vocabulary has a profound effect on your interactions. When you state an opinion as an absolute certainty, you invite conflict. You are daring people to challenge you. But when you present your ideas as a mere conception, an opinion in progress, you invite collaboration. People are much less likely to argue with you. In fact, they are more likely to listen to your reasoning because you are not threatening their own ego. This Socratic method of conversation, which you began practicing during your week on silence, is now your official policy. You find that you get your way in arguments and debates more often than ever before. By appearing less dogmatic, you become more persuasive. By putting on the cloak of humility, you actually become more powerful. And this is where the great paradox of humility kicks in. You are becoming very good at acting humble. But are you becoming humble? You confess this struggle in one of the most famous passages of your autobiography. You write that you could never truly conquer your pride. Even when you thought you had achieved a state of humility, you would find yourself feeling proud of your own humility. It's a perfect, inescapable logical loop. Pride is a weed that can grow even in the soil of its own supposed eradication. If you think, wow, I am a truly humble person, you have just proven that you are not. This leads to the great historical debate about your humility. Was it genuine, or was it the most sophisticated form of public relations imaginable? Some historians see your adoption of the humble persona as a sincere, if imperfect, attempt at self-improvement. You knew you had a problem with pride, and you used these techniques to actively fight against it. Other historians, however, see it as the ultimate power move. They argue that you simply put on humility as you would put on a clean shirt. It was a social strategy. You realized that the humble inquirer was a much more effective character to play than the arrogant genius. It disarmed your rivals, charmed your patrons, and allowed you to push through your agenda with less resistance. In this view, your humility was the final, brilliant polish on your carefully constructed public image. It was, to use a modern term, the ultimate humble brag. A fascinating, little-known example of this in practice was your relationship with your own popular creation, Poor Richard Saunders. You, Benjamin Franklin, were a sophisticated man of science and letters, but you wrote your almanac in the persona of a simple, folksy, and somewhat bumbling astrologer. Poor Richard was your humble alter ego. This allowed you to dispense wisdom and advice to the common people without sounding like an arrogant intellectual talking down to them. It was a masterclass in strategic humility. You could be both the brilliant man and the humble man at the same time, by splitting yourself into two characters. The nightly accounting in the little book during this week is a confusing affair. How do you even track humility? If you have a good day and don't mark any spots, does that make you proud of your success, thus creating a new fault? You find yourself in a philosophical maze. You decide to focus on tracking specific, observable behaviors. Did you contradict someone directly? Did you use a word like certainly? Did you boast about an accomplishment? By focusing on these external actions rather than the internal state of being humble, you make the virtue manageable, if not entirely conquerable. As the week ends, you have a new and powerful set of tools for social navigation. You have learned to soften your language, to listen more, and to guide conversations with questions rather than assertions. You are a more effective and well-liked man. But the core problem of pride remains. You conclude that it may be one of the natural passions that is simply impossible to fully extinguish. The best you can do is to manage its outward expression. You can, perhaps, act humble, even if you can't always feel humble. It's a pragmatic compromise, a fitting conclusion to your struggle with the most slippery virtue of them all. You have not achieved the humility of a saint, but you have, at least, learned to stop being so obviously proud of your own cleverness. And in the world of practical affairs, that is a victory in itself. For many months, your project has been an internal, personal quest. It has been about re-engineering your own character, one virtue at a time. The benefits have been personal, a clearer mind, a more successful business, a more stable life. But now, as you gain mastery over your own small world, your focus begins to shift outward. You start to see that the same principles you used to improve yourself can be used to improve your community. The project is about to scale up. You are moving from self-help to society building. This transition is not a conscious, planned event. It happens organically. It begins with your intellectual club, the Junto. The club was founded for mutual improvement, and you realize that this is just your virtue project applied to a group. You proposed rules for the Junto's conversations that mirrored your own virtues. Discussions should be sincere, free of a desire for conversational dominance, humility, and focused on beneficial topics, silence. The Junto becomes a collective exercise in virtuous discourse. Then, an idea sparks from one of these conversations. The members of the Junto all love to read, but books are expensive and scarce. Each of you owns a few books, but you long for access to more. You propose a solution that is a perfect expression of your system. You suggest that all the members pool their books into a common collection, creating a shared library. This is your first great civic hack. It applies the principles of frugality. It's cheaper for everyone. And industry. It promotes useful knowledge to a community problem. The initial experiment is a success, but it's messy. Books get lost or damaged. It's a problem of order, so you refine the system. You move from the informal book pooling idea to a more structured one, a subscription library. You will solicit subscriptions from the wider public. Each subscriber pays a small fee, and that money is used to purchase new books and hire a librarian to manage them. You write and publish the proposal, using your Socratic, humble method of persuasion. You draft the rules for the library, creating a system that is just, orderly, and sustainable. In 1731, the Library Company of Philadelphia is born. It is the first successful subscription library in America, and it is a direct, tangible result of your self-improvement project. You have taken the operating system you designed for your own soul and used it to create a new piece of social hardware for your city. This becomes your new model. You start to see Philadelphia not as a given reality, but as a system that can be debuted and upgraded. You apply the virtues on a civic scale. You see the danger of fire. The city's response is chaotic. This is a failure of order and justice, omitting the benefit of safety. So you propose the Union Fire Company, a well-organized, disciplined group of volunteers. The system works. You see the lack of proper law enforcement. This is a failure of tranquility and justice. So you propose and help organize a city watch and a militia. You see the sick being cared for in poor conditions. This is a failure of what could be considered a civic form of cleanliness and justice. So you campaign tirelessly to found the Pennsylvania Hospital, a place where the sick can receive proper, orderly care. Each of these projects is a virtue made manifest in the physical world. The library is a temple to industry and knowledge. The fire company is a monument to order and civic duty. The hospital is an institution of justice and care. You are no longer just trying to be a virtuous man. You are trying to build a virtuous city. This outward turn has given rise to one of the most significant debates about your legacy. Were you at heart a moral philosopher or a brilliant social engineer? Some scholars argue that your primary motivation was always philosophical. You believed that a virtuous citizenry was the foundation of a successful republic. By creating institutions that promoted knowledge, the library, security, the fire company, and health, the hospital, you were creating the necessary conditions for people to become better, more enlightened citizens. You were shaping the moral character of your society. Other historians take a more pragmatic view. They see you less as a moralist and more as a brilliant problem solver. You were at your core an inventor. You saw a problem, inefficient firefighting, lack of access to books, and you invented a solution. These civic institutions were your greatest inventions. They weren't necessarily about making people good in a spiritual sense. They were about making society work better. It was about efficiency, safety, and progress. It was a form of large-scale life hacking. A little-known aspect of this is how you used your own printing press as the central engine for all these projects. For every proposal, you would first write a persuasive essay, often under a pseudonym. Then you would print it in your newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, to build public support. Then you would print the subscription forms, the official charters, and the annual reports. Your personal business and your public projects were completely intertwined. Your virtue of industry and the print shop directly fueled your ability to bring civic justice and order to Philadelphia. As you get older, The scaling up process will continue, moving from the city to the nation, and even to the world. Your proposal for an intercolonial union at the Albany Congress is an attempt to apply the principles of order and mutual benefit to the fractious American colonies. Your scientific work, which you share freely without seeking patents, is an expression of industry and justice on a global scale. You look back at the little book, the starting point of it all. That humble, private project of marking black spots in a grid has metastasized. It has grown from a personal checklist into a blueprint for a new kind of society, one based on reason, mutual benefit, and continuous improvement. The question of whether you ever achieved personal moral perfection has become almost irrelevant. You may not have perfected your own soul, but in the process of trying, you helped to build a city. And that, you realize, might be a more meaningful kind of virtue after all. You are now an established figure in Philadelphia. Your name is synonymous with industry, frugality, and a host of successful civic projects. The young, struggling printer who first drew that grid in a little book is gone, replaced by a man of substance and influence. Your system has worked. It has brought you wealth, reputation, and the satisfaction of seeing your community improve through your efforts. But with success comes scrutiny. And now you begin to encounter a new, more sophisticated kind of criticism. People start to ask a question that will echo through the centuries and become the central debate of your legacy. Is any of this real? Or is it all a performance? Is your entire life a sincere quest for virtue? Or is it the most masterful, long-term marketing campaign in history? The question comes at you in subtle ways. A rival in the assembly might hint that your proposals for public works are designed more to burnish your own reputation than to serve the public good. A friend might gently tease you about your Poor Richard persona, suggesting it's a clever mask you wear to win over the common folk. You yourself are not naive about this. You are keenly aware of the power of perception. You once told a young tradesman that to succeed, it was not enough to be industrious and frugal. He must also avoid all appearances to the contrary. You advised him to be seen at his work early and late, and never at a tavern for idle amusement. You understood, instinctively, that in the world of commerce and politics, reputation is a form of currency. So, when the question arises, is it genuine virtue or just personal branding, you don't have a simple answer. In your own mind, the two are so deeply intertwined that the question itself seems flawed. You believe that good character produces good results. A sincere commitment to industry naturally leads to a better reputation. A genuine practice of justice naturally wins you allies and respect. To you, trying to separate the inner virtue from the outer reputation is like trying to separate the heat of a fire from its light. This is where the great historical debate about you truly ignites. Let's call the two main camps the idealists and the cynics. The idealists look at the sheer, lifelong consistency of your efforts. They see your autobiography, where you lay out this whole project, as a sincere gift to posterity, a genuine attempt to share a method for a better life. They point to your final acts, like becoming the president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, as proof that your moral compass, though a product of its time, was ultimately pointed toward justice. They argue that no one could maintain such a complex performance for over 60 years. The effort and dedication must have been genuine. The cynics, on the other hand, see a master strategist at work. They view your autobiography not as a confession, but as the final, brilliant piece of personal branding. By writing your own story, you got to frame your life exactly as you wanted it to be seen, a steady, rational climb from rags to riches, powered by virtue. The cynics argue that you were a brilliant actor who created a character called Benjamin Franklin, and you played that role to perfection. They point to the wheelbarrow incident, pushing your own paper through the streets as a prime example. Was that frugality, or was it a calculated piece of street theater designed to impress your creditors? The cynics would say it was pure theater. A fascinating little-known piece of evidence that the cynics love is your relationship with religious piety. In your autobiography, you speak respectfully of religion and its utility in promoting good behavior. You even compose your own deistic prayer. But in private, you showed little interest in organized worship and held beliefs that were, for your time, quite unorthodox. The cynics argue that you adopted a veneer of conventional piety because it was socially unpolitically advantageous. You performed religion for the same reason you performed humility, because it was useful. Your public statements about faith were part of the brand, not a reflection of your true convictions. This entire debate, sincere idealist versus cynical brand manager, is, of course, a modern construction. You would not have thought in these terms. The 20th and 21st centuries, with their focus on marketing, media, and the concept of the authentic self, are obsessed with this distinction. We live in an age that is deeply suspicious of public figures, and we are constantly trying to peel back the public mask to find the real person underneath. You, however, came from a different world. You were a man of the theater in a sense. The 18th century was an age of elaborate social roles, of wigs and manners and carefully crafted letters. The idea of a single, authentic self was not as powerful as it is today. You were a son, a brother, a husband, a printer, a scientist, a diplomat, a founding father. You played many parts because your life contained many acts. The idea that one of these parts was fake and another was real might have struck you as a strange and pointless distinction. Use it with this criticism, this insinuation that you are a fraud. It's a more painful injury than any simple insult, because it questions the very foundation of your life's work. Does it trouble your tranquility? Yes, but you apply your system. You analyze the criticism. You find the truth in it. You are conscious of your reputation. You forbear resenting it because resentment is useless. And you resolve to continue on your path. Ultimately, you decide to let your actions speak for themselves. You may never be able to convince the cynics. In your time or in the centuries to come, you cannot prove the contents of your own soul. All you can do is continue to build libraries, organize fire departments, invent useful devices, and work for the betterment of your city and your country. If that is just personal branding, then so be it. It is a brand that leaves the world a better place than you found it. And that, you conclude, is a form of sincerity that truly matters. Years are passing. The little book, once fresh and new, is now worn and soft from being carried in your pocket for so long. The pages are filled with the ghosts of countless black spots, a long and detailed record of your imperfections. The grand project of achieving moral perfection, which began with the fiery optimism of youth, has settled into the quiet, steady rhythm of middle age. And with this passage of time comes a profound and final shift in your understanding of the whole endeavor. You begin to accept that you will never, ever reach the end. The destination you set for yourself, a life without fault, is a mirage. It shimmers on the horizon, always appearing attainable, but it never gets any closer. For every step you take toward it by conquering one habit, you take a step back by discovering a new, more subtle flaw. You have mastered the obvious vices of your youth, but now you contend with the more sophisticated sins of a successful man, a touch of complacency, a hint of vanity, the temptation to rest on your laurels. You think back to your old nemesis, the virtue of order. You never conquered it. Your desk is still an scape of creative clutter. Your schedule is still frequently disrupted by the common or unavoidable accidents of life. For years, this failure was a source of frustration. Now, you look at it with a sense of gentle, weary amusement. It is simply who you are. Your mind is too full of schemes and ideas to be bothered with the minute-to-minute tidings that your system demands. You have come to realize that the project is not a race to a finish line, but a process of continuous maintenance. It's like tending a garden. You can never say, the garden is finished. You must always be watering, weeding, and pruning. The work is never done. And the moment you stop, the weeds of your old habits will start to creep back in. This acceptance is not a sign of defeat. It is a sign of wisdom. It frees you from the anxiety of the impossible goal. You stop judging yourself by the standard of the perfectly clean page and start appreciating the value of the effort itself. You have not become a saint, but you have become a very effective man. And you realize that the system's true purpose was not to make you perfect, but to make you better. This idea that the pursuit is more important than the attainment is a concept that has intrigued philosophers for ages, and it becomes the central lesson of your life. It's a conclusion that directly challenges the all-or-nothing thinking that can so often derail attempts at self-improvement. This is a point that historians who study your methods often emphasize. The genius of your system was not that it worked perfectly, but that it was designed to accommodate imperfection. The nightly review and the black spots were not just tools for judgment. They were a built-in mechanism for forgiveness and renewal. Each day you failed, and each morning you got to start again. The system had a reboot function built into its daily schedule. The morning question, "What good shall I do this day?" was an invitation to a fresh start, regardless of how many black spots you had marked the night before. You also realized that some of your virtues are in a natural, healthy tension with each other. A rigid adherence to order would kill your creative spark. An extreme devotion to frugality would prevent you from making bold investments in your business or your community. An absolute commitment to silence would make you a hermit. Life, you now understand, is not about maximizing any single virtue to perfection. It is about finding a wise and dynamic balance between them. The goal is not a straight line, but a state of equilibrium. This leads to a lesser-known but telling evolution in your practice. In your later years, you don't talk as much about the rigid system of the little book. Instead, you talk more about developing a general disposition or habitude of virtue. The training wheels of the strict daily accounting are less necessary once the habit of self-awareness is ingrained. You have internalized the process. The little book is no longer a constant companion, because the principles it represents have become part of your mental architecture. You no longer need the map because you have learned the territory. As you reflect on this, you are sitting in your comfortable home, surrounded by the fruits of your long and industrious life. You are a world-renowned scientist, a respected statesman, a beloved figure in your city. You are, by any reasonable standard, a tremendous success, and none of it came from achieving perfection. It all came from the relentless, imperfect, and lifelong process of trying. You think about the metaphor you once used, of the man who wanted to buy a perfectly ground axe from a blacksmith. The smith offered to grind it to a perfect, gleaming edge, but warned it would be a lot of hard work. The man worked the grindstone for a while, but then grew tired and said the axe was good enough as it was. "I like a speckled axe best," he said. For a long time, you saw that as a story about laziness. Now, you see a different wisdom in it. You are the man with the speckled axe. Your character has been ground against the stone of your system for decades. It is not perfectly bright. It is still speckled with flaws, but it is sharp. It is strong. It is useful. And you have come to accept, and even appreciate, your speckled axe. The unattainable, shining goal of perfection has been replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived and a tool well used. The end you now see was never the end. The journey was everything. The years have silvered your hair and etched themselves onto your face. You are no longer the ambitious young printer, but an old man, a grandfather to a nation you helped create. You sit in your garden, at your home in Philadelphia, a book resting unread in your lap. Your body is frail, plagued by gout and other ailments, but your mind is still sharp, and it has a tendency to drift backward in time. Your thoughts return, as they often do, to that audacious project you began so many decades ago. You conjure an image of your younger self, a determined, slightly arrogant young man, standing in a small, rented room, mapping out a campaign to conquer his own soul. You can't help but smile at his youthful confidence, his belief that human character could be perfected like a mathematical equation. What would you, the old man, say to that young man now? You would not discourage him. You would admire his ambition, his faith in the power of reason. But you would also offer a gentle, moderating counsel. You would tell him that the map he is drawing is not the territory. You would warn him that the path to virtue is not a straight, paved Roman road, but a winding, overgrown trail through a forest with unexpected turns, sudden storms, and moments of being completely and utterly lost. You think about the little book itself. It's probably tucked away in a trunk somewhere, a relic of a bygone era of your life. You chuckle when you think about how seriously you took those little black spots, how each one felt like a stinging defeat. From the vantage point of old age, you see them not as failures, but as the price of admission to a fuller life. They were the signs of engagement, of struggle, of a man wrestling with his own nature rather than passively accepting it. A perfectly clean page, you now realize, would have been the sign of a life unlived. You reflect on the virtues themselves and how your understanding of them has deepened over time. Temperance, you learned, was not just about avoiding dullness from food and drink, but about maintaining a clear mind for a long life of productive work. Silence was not about being mute, but about making your words more valuable, a lesson that served you well in the delicate negotiations of diplomacy. Order, your old foe, taught you the most profound lesson of all, the importance of accepting your own limitations. You learned to live with a speckled axe, and in doing so, you learned a kind of self-forgiveness that was not on your original list. Resolution was the engine, but you learned it had to be tempered by wisdom, lest you become a stubborn fool performing resolutions that were no longer useful. Frugality and industry were the twin pillars of your worldly success, the virtues that bought you your greatest treasure, freedom. Freedom from debt, freedom from a demanding boss, the freedom to spend your time on the projects you cared about, like science and public service. And humility. You smile at the memory of your struggle with that one. You never conquered pride, not really, but you did learn to hide it well. And you discovered that performing humility had a curious effect. Sometimes, if you pretended to be humble for long enough, you could almost trick yourself into feeling it for a moment or two. This long, backward look prompts a question that biographers will forever ask. Did the project work? Did you succeed? Looking around at your comfortable home, at the city you helped to build, at the new nation you signed into existence, the worldly answer is an unambiguous yes. The habits of virtue made you a trusted, respected, and effective man. They were the foundation of everything you achieved. But on the deeper question, did you achieve moral perfection? The answer is an equally unambiguous no, and you are at peace with that. You see the entire project now not as a failure to achieve perfection, but as a successful, lifelong process of becoming. This is the final, quiet wisdom you have extracted from your experiment. The modern world you helped to create would become obsessed with results, with final products, with success measured in quantifiable achievements. But you have learned that the true value lies in the process. The person you became while striving for virtue was infinitely more important than the unattainable goal of virtue itself. This leads to a little-known, almost melancholy reflection you sometimes have. In creating such a successful public persona, the wise, witty, avuncular drive. Franklin, did you lose something of yourself? The character you created was so beloved, so effective, that it sometimes felt like a suit of armor you could no longer take off. The world wanted the wise aphorisms of Pooh Richard, not the complex, sometimes contradictory thoughts of the real man. Did your system of self-creation work a little too well? Was the brand so successful that it consumed the man? It's a question without an answer, a trifle to trouble your tranquility on a quiet afternoon. But the feeling passes. The sun is warm on your face. The garden is peaceful. Your life has been long and by any measure useful. You look back at that young man with his charts and his rules, and you feel a sense of profound gratitude toward him. His crazy, arrogant, beautiful project gave your life a structure, a purpose, and a direction. He set you on a path, and though you never reached his imagined destination, it has been a magnificent journey. The light is fading, both on the day outside your window and on the long day of your life. You are frail now, confined mostly to your bed. The bustling world of Philadelphia, the city you shaped with your hands and mind, now exists for you mostly as sounds drifting in from the street, the rattle of a cart, the call of a vendor. They are echoes from a life you once lived with such vigor. Your mind, however, remains a busy workshop. It sifts through memories, not with the sharp, analytical focus of your younger years, but with the softer, more dreamlike quality. And today, your thoughts drift to that little book. Not the physical object, which is long since lost to time, but the idea of it, the system, the project. You imagine it in a new context. You see it not as a tool for a young printer in a colonial city, but as something more universal. You wonder if the principles you stumbled upon could travel through time. The technology of the world will change, you are certain of that. You, more than anyone, have seen the pace of innovation. There will be new kinds of printing presses, new ways to travel, new forms of government. But will human nature change? Will people in the future still struggle with laziness, with pride, with a short temper, with a disorganized desk? You suspect they will. And in that moment, you see your little book not as a relic of the past, but as a message in a bottle tossed into the ocean of time. You imagine someone a century or two from now finding it. What will they think of your quaint list of virtues? What will they make of your meticulous, slightly obsessive tracking of black spots? They might laugh at its simplicity. They will have access to knowledge and tools you can barely dream of. They will likely have a much more sophisticated understanding of the human mind, of psychology, of the very chemistry of emotion. Your homespun method will seem like a piece of primitive folk wisdom, but you have a quiet, humble hope that they will also see something valuable in it, that they might recognize the fundamental pattern you discovered. The idea of breaking down a large goal into small, manageable parts, the power of focusing on one thing at a time, the importance of daily practice and self-reflection, the wisdom of starting over again each day. You see your project as a kind of digital artifact, long before the concept of digital exists. It's a piece of code for the human operating system. And the code is simple. Define your values, track your behavior, review your progress, adjust your course. Repeat forever. This very idea that your personal system could be a legacy is what led you to include it in your autobiography. You wrote about it not as a boast, but as a humble offering. You presented it as an experiment that was useful to you, and that might be useful to others. And here you touch upon a final, subtle debate for future historians. When you wrote about your project, were you accurately describing a system you followed rigidly your whole life? Or were you, in your old age, tidying up the messy reality? Did you present a more streamlined, more successful version of the project than what you actually experienced? Some scholars argue that the autobiography is a sanitized version of events. You smoothed out the periods of doubt, you downplayed the failures, and you presented the whole thing as a neat, linear progression. You were, in effect, creating the final, definitive brand for your life, a legacy of rational self-mastery. But perhaps a more generous interpretation is that you were simply doing what any good teacher does. You were extracting the essential lessons from a long and complicated life. You were simplifying the message to make it more useful for your audience. You weren't lying about the past, you were distilling it. You imagine your little book, your system being reborn in a future you cannot see. Perhaps it will not be a book at all. Perhaps it will be something held in the palm of the hand, a device of glass and light. Perhaps people will track their virtues not with ink spots, but with glowing pixels. They might call it habit tracking or personal analytics or some other strange new term. The thought is comforting. It means the work was not just for you. It was not just about building a successful printing business or a life in Philadelphia. It was about an idea. And ideas, you know, are the only things that truly last. They are more durable than paper, more powerful than stone. Your breathing is shallow now. The sounds from the street are growing faint. The project that began with the bold question, "What good shall I do this day?" is ending with the quiet, final question that you scheduled for every evening, "What good have I done this day?" You have no little book to mark tonight, but you can see the ledger of your life. It is not a clean page. It is speckled with spots, with errata, with failures of order and humility. But it is also filled with other things. A library, a fire department, a university, a hospital, a nation, a new understanding of electricity, a collection of useful inventions, a family that you love. It is a full and profoundly useful book. It is a good book, and it is enough. The room grows quiet now, the edges of your consciousness beginning to soften and blur. The weight of the long day, the long life, settles upon you like a warm, heavy blanket. The relentless inner voice of the project, the auditor, the judge, the taskmaster, finally falls silent. There are no more virtues to practice, no more faults to record. The little book is closed. You feel a sense of drifting, a gentle unmooring from the solid world of cobblestone streets and printing presses. The sharp lines of your memories begin to dissolve into a watercolor wash of feelings and images. You see the face of your wife, Deborah, young, unsmiling. You feel the thrill of a kite string in a thunderstorm, the crackle of a new idea sparking in your mind. You smell the ink and paper of your shop, a scent that for so long was the scent of your own ambition. These are not thoughts to be analyzed or organized. They are simply present, floating with you in a warm and peaceful current. The striving is over. The endless effort to improve, to build, to become has given way to a simple state of being. You are no longer Benjamin Franklin, the inventor, the statesman, the man of 1,000 projects. You are just a consciousness, easing into a deep and profound rest. The little black spots of failure and the bright marks of success all fade into the same gentle, gray twilight. They no longer matter. The accounting is done. The only thing that remains is this feeling of peace, a tranquility more complete than any you ever managed to achieve in your waking life. You are floating now, on a quiet river, toward a dreamless sleep.